Chapter 11. Make a Wish in Advance. Across the portal stood a Japanese temple, wrapped in the stillness of night. When Emiya Kiritsugu and the others stepped through, stunned and unprepared, their eyes fell on a torii gate directly facing the temple's main hall. Beyond the gate rose a mountain, and at its base the lights of Fuyuki City glowed against the dark. They were standing in the open space between the main hall and the torii, under a scattering of stars and a moon that poured silver over the stone paving beneath their feet. Could this be one of the 5 great magics, the second magic from the old legends? Iris Veal whispered, covering her mouth as her pupils trembled. That's not it, Mr. Lion said, scanning the place before turning to correct Ilya. It's just a portal. We're in Fuyuki, the city where the Holy Grail War begins. Fuyuki! Ilya's eyes lit up. She darted to the base of the torii, produced a camera, and started photographing the city's nightscape from under the mountain gate. Ilya bounced alongside her, the 2 girls full of childish excitement. The others regarded Mr. Lion with mixed expressions. Emiya Kiritsugu, sizing things up the way he always did, suspected a tactical motive. Coming to Fuyuki now, are you planning to eliminate the other masters tonight? End the war early? With his power, he could easily seize others' servants, Kiritsugu added, thinking like a man who'd made hard choices before. Engage others ahead of schedule? Altria said, wary. That might end things sooner, but it would also expose us. Mr. Lion. You misunderstand, Mr. Lion interrupted and stepped toward Irisveal. He reached out and touched her. At once, innumerable motes of light began to float from Irisveal's body. The lights coalesced midair and reformed into a gleaming golden cup. The Holy Grail? Kiritsugu's pupils tightened. How is that, on Irisveal? Saying it's on her isn't quite right, Mr. Lion replied. She isn't carrying it. She is the Lesser Holy Grail. She was made to be part of the Grail system. He let the Lesser Holy Grail hover in his palm. Irisveal, an artificial human created by the Einsburn family, had always been the vessel for the Lesser Holy Grail. Her life had been kept deliberately short so that, as servants fell during the Grail War and their souls returned, she would gradually reach the end of her life and ultimately become the Greater Holy Grail. That had been her mission. The Einsburn family had engineered her so their family could pursue the third magic through the Holy Grail War, knowledge that had been hidden from Kiritsugu until now. With Mr. Lion's revelation, the truth could no longer be concealed. Irisveal's pale smile confirmed it. Altria let out a breath of relief for Irisveal. If Mr. Lion can take out the Holy Grail, then you, she began, voice thick, you wouldn't have to sacrifice yourself. Irisveal smiled, bitterness and resignation mingling in it. This is our mission. There's no escaping it. If not me, then Ilya would have to go through this. Altria was left speechless. A stone lodged itself in her chest at the thought. She sympathized with Irisveal, but the Grail's mechanism remained unchanged. Mr. Lion's expression turned practical. If you have trouble accepting it, then use this chance to complete the mission, he said. The Einsburn family is down to a line of artificial humans. Your goal is to reproduce the third magic, and opportunity is before you. The Lesser Holy Grail in his hand began to glow. It's activated? Altria exclaimed. How is that possible? Nothing is impossible, Mr. Lion said evenly. He explained how the so-called Holy Grail system worked. A greater Grail magic circle lay beneath this temple, drawing power from the ley lines. Once enough magic had accumulated, heroic spirits could be summoned. 7 servants would appear in succession, fight and die, their souls returning to the Lesser Grail. To send those souls back to the Throne of Heroes, the Lesser Grail would open a small hole toward the root. The Greater Grail's power could temporarily fix that small hole during the process. Whether one sought to realize a wish or to reach the root to achieve the third magic, that opportunity presented itself now. Mr. Lion reached out and grasped Altria's arm. Let me observe your current state of existence, he said, and activated a supernal vision. He examined her closely, then sent a pulse of divine power flowing through her body. After a few breaths, he released her. Above the Lesser Holy Grail, small duplicate Altrias suddenly appeared, one after another, each leaping into the cup. Creating heroic spirits? Altria asked, stunned. Mr. Lion smiled and set the Lesser Holy Grail on the ground. They'll merge with your main self through the Throne of Heroes. Consider it a boon. After the sixth tiny Altria dived in, the cup trembled. The clear sky above the temple darkened. A faint, pitch-black void began to form. When the last of the little Altrias jumped in, something thrust out from the bottom of the lesser Holy Grail. The void in the sky solidified fully, a hole opening from this world to the root. In the temple, everyone stood frozen, watching the phenomenon. Across Fuyuki, other masters who had not yet comprehended what unfolded were even more shocked. If there was already a settlement screen before the Grail War had truly started, then their understanding of the ritual was shattered. Whether they had summoned servants or not, masters from all corners were now hurrying toward the temple beneath the dark aperture. "All right," Mr. Lion said, a thinly veiled smile on his face. "You may make a wish now. Irisveal, if you want world peace. Or you, Altria, if you want to save your kingdom. Now is the time." Both Altria and Irisveal exchanged complex looks. "You really expect us to wish?" Irisveal's voice was tight. You don't have a wish yourself?" Mr. Lion's warning came softer this time. "I should remind you, although the Holy Grail can grant wishes now, the manner in which wishes are granted may not be what you expect." Altria stiffened. "What do you mean?" "The Grail is tainted," Mr. Lion said. "It carries the evil of humanity. Any wish it grants will be manifested through that evil." Altria and Kiritsugu both looked unbelieving. "That can't be," Altria whispered. "Then test it." Mr. Lion nodded toward the cup. Desire outweighed doubt. Altria stepped forward, expression grave and resolute. Kiritsugu, his own motives complex, his goals harsh enough to justify sacrifices, moved in step beside her. Both halted before the lesser Holy Grail, and as they looked down, each felt their consciousness being drawn into the golden vessel. Chapter 522, Purification of Black Mud. At that moment, the golden Holy Grail suddenly dimmed. Its sanctity vanished in an instant, replaced by an opposite, malignant aura. From the bottom of the chalice, viscous black and red mud oozed out, like blood steeped in malice. As it overflowed and ran down the cup, the whole Ryudoji temple was swallowed by an overwhelming sense of wickedness. Leijiduo. Eri quietly gripped Leon's wrist. She produced her courage stick, looked to him, and with her eyes urged him to let her act. She had read Fate's tales many times. She knew the black mud in the small Holy Grail came from the great Holy Grail, all the evils of this world. When the two grails connected, that outlet let the evils pour into reality. Those evils were endless. The mud would keep coming until it engulfed the world. And now, of course, it was time for Full Moon Wave to make an appearance. "I told you to call me Leon. If you want to move, go ahead," he said, patting her head. Eri nodded and walked toward the temple's torii gate. Ilya, worried about Waimiya Chieshi, noticed her and asked, "Big sister, what are you going to do?" "Ilya," Eri paused. Her normally indifferent face took on a solemnity Ilya couldn't quite read. She whispered, "Have you ever seen light?" "Light?" Ilya shook her head, puzzled. Eri didn't answer. She raised the courage stick high. In the pitch-black night, hidden by storm clouds, brilliant light blossomed and a blue-silver giant appeared. Ilya's small mouth formed an O. "Big sister, she turned into a giant." The giant waved at Ilya. Leon translated for her. "Eri says it's not a giant, it's light." "Light?" Ilya's eyes lit up with understanding. For a girl her age, something this flashy was thrilling and harmlessly exciting. Eri drew a circle with her hand and unleashed Full Moon Wave toward the hole torn in the sky. The light cut through Fuyuki's darkness like a torch, streaking across half the city. The brightness was blinding, comparable to a 500,000 or 600,000 lumen flare. The next day, the church assigned to conceal mystical incidents would have a terrible time explaining this away. Full Moon Wave was dazzling, but it had no special effect on all the evils of this world. The beam struck the huge hole in the sky and only made it tremble. Eri stopped, drew another circle, and released the moon god purification beam. Colorful light carved into the breach, and in less than a breath, countless tiny motes of light detonated inside. Those motes were the evils of this world peeled away from the great Holy Grail. The moon god beam was working. The murky sky, tainted by the breach, gradually cleared. The tide of malice carried by the great Holy Grail could not withstand Eri's purification. From the hole came a faint, unwilling roar that weakened as she continued to press the light. At one point, Ilya wriggled free from Irisveel's embrace and shouted, "Go, big sister!" At that instant, Emiya, Kiritsugu, and Altria opened their eyes. The Holy Grail had ejected their spirits. After a moment of daze, Kiritsugu's expression fell into utter dejection. His eyes, already bleak, turned lifeless and cavernous. Altria collapsed in despair. Her oath sword, hidden by the Wind King's barrier, clattered to the ground. Both had received the Grail's worst answers. Irisveel and her daughter ran to support Kiritsugu. Altria, left unattended, knelt on the stone, spent. Even the Holy Grail cannot save Britain. Her voice was hoarse and quivering. Leon asked softly, "What did you see in the Grail?" To ensure Britain's survival, the Grail would kill all humans except Britain, and to prevent civil strife, it would then kill everyone in Britain, leaving only me and Guinevere. Altria buried her face in shadowed hair. That is exactly the kind of solution a Black Mud Grail would offer. But there's nothing to despair over. I told you, it's a contaminated Grail. Once Arii fully purifies the Grail, you can make wishes normally, Leon said. Purification? Both Altria and Kiritsugu looked up, hope sparking. Arii, my lord, where is she? Leon pointed toward the temple gate. The giant figure stood on the mountain path, pouring light toward the gash in the sky. Over there. Altria stared, stunned. She? Wait a little longer, Leon said with a small smile, then grew more serious. Even a fully functional Holy Grail might not grant what you want. The so-called granting of wishes is really using the enormous store of magical energy in the Grail to stabilize the connection it makes to the root, and then, by the method you know, achieve the wish, he explained. Saber, you wish to save Britain and replace yourself with a more suitable ruler. That's more practical. The Grail can help with time travel or parallel worlds to do it. But Waimia Chishi, you want world peace. Honestly, even you can't define what counts as peace. That kind of vague wish the Grail cannot realize. The true function of the Grail is to reach the root, Leon said flatly. The root is the universe's Akashic record. It records the beginning and end of all things, the ultimate goal of mages. Altria stared at him. So you don't have a wish? You want to use the Grail to reach the root? It can be done without the Grail, Leon admitted. But when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Better to follow local customs. As they spoke, Arii finished purifying the great Holy Grail. The sky returned to a clear, starry night with a bright moon. The yawning hole still hung high over Fuyuki, but its malevolence had vanished. It now held only a deep, solemn profundity. Arii slowly lowered her hand, hands on her hips like an Ultraman about to revert to human form. At that moment, masters and servants who'd rushed in from across Fuyuki arrived at last. Mongrels, who permitted you to secretly steal the king's treasures? The sin of theft deserves death. Gilgamesh stood before his golden, gleaming noble phantasm, his arrogant voice arriving before him. Another bold voice followed. Oh la la la, someone actually summoned the Holy Grail already? The king of conquerors rolled in with his master, driving his own noble phantasm. In the shadows, hundred-faced Hassan crept closer from the trees. Outside the temple gate, Lancelot had just arrived, and even the ancient Matu Zukin lurked in the dark. The Holy Grail War, scheduled to begin more than half a year from now, had erupted early. This was supposed to be the start of a fierce fight. Even Altria, low on mana because her master Arii had none, had drawn her sword and readied herself. But King of Heroes Gilgamesh's opening line, "Mongrel," changed everything. Leon silently reverted his killing intent reflection to its original setting for the moment and stepped forward. Mongrel? If you ask me, all of you uninvited guests are trash. What? How dare a commoner speak such blasphemy? Gilgamesh's insult died in his throat. His brow twitched in outrage, and then, as if the anger had ruptured something within him, he collapsed and began to dissipate into motes of light. Oh dear, to be looked down upon like this. His voice faltered as his form unraveled. A second thud followed. The king of conquerors' anger flared, and just as he prepared to assume a kingly posture, his head tilted and he toppled from his mount. The mount and its screaming master cascaded down the hillside. It wasn't only the two kings. Lancelot, who had sprinted to the temple gate, was undone by the same wave of judgment. Even hundred-faced Hassan, hidden in the shadows, collapsed as one of his personalities flared and then extinguished. Light particles, residue of the heroic spirit's deaths, hovered over the ground, the sky, and in the trees. This, Altria clutched her longsword, momentarily uncertain where to point. Another thud came from the forest. Matuzukan, quietly observing from afar, had also been killed by the reflected killing intent. His main body worms hidden elsewhere lost their vitality at once. Emiya Kiritsugu, with his keen eyesight, recognized the old man even from the dense bushes. He had seen that visage in the Matu family records, and could only wipe a cold sweat. A single sentence had ended a war. He was reminded, again, how impossible an existence this young man who had broken into Einsburn Castle truly was. The blue and silver giant reverted to Erii. She trotted to where Gilgamesh's noble phantasm had fallen and touched it. "Is the king of heroes dead?" Erii asked Leon. "He's dead, got too emotional, and suffered a cerebral hemorrhage," Leon replied. From one angle, the killing intent reflection really did manifest like an enormous emotional shock that killed the targeted mind. The people around him gave awkward, nervous smiles at that explanation. Erii nodded and asked, "Is the king of conquerors dead too?" "Yes. And Waver Velvet? He's sobbing in the forest." "Then the Holy Grail War. We won, right?" Erii looked at the Grail as if discussing the plot with a friend during an intermission. Her tone was casual and unhurried. Leon couldn't help but smile. "Want to make a wish? Can I?" Her eyes brightened. Leon didn't lecture her about wishing to him instead of the Grail. He pointed to the chalice. "The Grail has a lot of mana. After Saber's wish is fulfilled, you'll still be able to make a few more. Give it a try." They moved to the wishing sequence. Emiya Kiritsugu, reluctant, tried to wish through the Grail again, but his grand hollow wish was not answered. Disappointed, he finally remembered Eri's earlier suggestion and asked simply to restore his wife and daughter to normal lifespans, something the Grail could address. Altria was next. King Arthur walked to the Grail, clutching her sword, nervous she might fail like Kiritsugu. The moment she touched it, she followed Leon's earlier advice without thinking. She wished to return to the time she first pulled the sword from the stone and find a more suitable king. That wish could be fulfilled. It had a defined path within the Grail's scope. Dazzling light spilled from the hole in the sky, enveloping Altria and carrying her back from the modern age. Irisveal smiled. Saber had been too young for such a cruel fate. When it was Eri's turn, she shook her head and told Leon, "Reach the root first." "Let me go first. Since when are you being modest?" Leon didn't go up to the Grail to make a wish. Instead, he detached a wisp of consciousness and drilled straight toward the hole in the sky. Before entering, he paused, waiting for the servants of the world consciousness to appear. In the Type Moon setting, the two planetary world consciousness, Alaya and Gaia, did not permit untrammeled access to the root. Anyone approaching the root risked catastrophic consequences to the world, so Alaya would usually send agents, those bound to her or heroic spirits from the throne of heroes, to stop or erase intruders. Leon expected some resistance. Instead, he received a vague, garbled message that resembled the world consciousness format he knew from the biohazard world. Enter, hack world truth at friend. He remembered that his traversal ability automatically packages and transmits his information to the world consciousness when he crosses a world. Earlier worlds hadn't had a conscious planetary entity, so he'd ignored the detail. Here in Type Moon, that packet would have been sent to Alaya and Gaia, so it made sense they acknowledged him. He replied with a cordial signal, then pushed into the hole and into the root. Before, Leon had thought of the root as only a record, a book containing every bit of a world's information. Now he knew otherwise. The root was simultaneously pitch black and kaleidoscopically bright, empty yet containing everything. It was simple in form, so simple that a single glance revealed an aspect of a world's truth, yet so staggeringly complex that every second it tried to pour infinite knowledge into his mind. An ordinary mage arriving here would be overwhelmed and assimilated by the endless torrent of information. Leon, however, was in his element. His different bodies were not all equal in strength, but his soul was one, and its power was the sum of all his clones, a cosmic-level whole. The Type Moon root held the information of a small multiverse. For Leon, it was like bread soaking up water. New knowledge flowed into him by the second. He had previously comprehended the world construct laws of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now he was about to gain another piece of cosmic-level knowledge, how the Type Moon multiverse was built. Compared to Marvel, Type Moon's single universe and its multiverse of parallel worlds were smaller, but this knowledge helped him break out of the constraints of the Marvel law framework. Crucially, the Root's information was transparent. Every detail of its 5 great magics, countless miracles, physical and magical rules, everything could be learned freely. Past visitors had feared to absorb everything. Leon did not. He reveled in it. Understanding the world's truths felt far better than solving any difficult problem. Still, the information of even a small multiverse is vast. He could not master it all instantly. He left an M-body at the Root to continue learning in earnest, while a sliver of consciousness controlled his main body outside. "I've reached the Root," he sent back. "Go, Arii, make your wish." Half an hour later, in front of Ryudu Temple's main hall, Leon opened his eyes and let Arii step forward to the Grail. Chapter 524, Akihiro's Wish. I hope Leijiduo never leaves. Arii made her wish to the Holy Grail. Magic swelled inside the Grail, then quickly subsided. Apparently the Grail could not grant that. Arii blinked, a little disappointed but not surprised. She paused, then tried again. I hope to fulfill Leijiduo's wish. This time the Grail gave no response. Arii thought for a moment and reshaped her wish. I hope to use whatever magic remains in the Holy Grail to help Altria achieve her wish. Before she could add anything else, the Grail released all its power. Dense magic wrapped around Arii, lifting her slowly, as if she were an angel ascending. Ryan stared in shock. Arii, what did you wish for? He could feel an enormous flow of magic tearing through time and space, preparing to send Arii away. The girl he had brought with him was about to depart on a long journey. Too sudden, too bewildering. Arii, hovering above the ground, looked down at him. I asked the Holy Grail to help Altria. Altria? Ryan put the pieces together. Altria's true wish was for someone to take her place as King of Britain. You want to help her, so the Holy Grail turned you into a child of heaven, and you're going to become King Arthur, Arii. Arii's eyes widened, as if she'd been handed the lead role in a murder mystery game. Be King Arthur? She hesitated, then grew anxious. What about Leijiduo? I told you to call me Rion. And you, Rion? Arii corrected herself hastily. I'll go with you to see. Much of Rion's consciousness was already immersed in the Root. Learning its knowledge would take time. During that period, his physical body's location was irrelevant. It would do no harm to visit Altria at the end of the Age of Gods. He looked briefly toward the Emiya family. Wimiya Kishi, goodbye. Take care of your family. The Holy Grail's magic is spent, and the war will flare again in 60 years, he said. As for the third magic, look, I've mastered it. The Einsburn family's mission is complete. Rion did not forget to bid farewell to the Wamiya Keshi family, and with a small demonstration of the third magic he had learned from the Root, he prepared to leave. Just before Arii vanished, he grabbed her wrist and tore them both from the present world. Inside Ryudoji Temple, the Wamiya Chieshi family looked at one another in shock. Big sister's gone. Wamiya Chieshi, should we go home? No, Ilya and Mother are no longer homunculi. We'll live in Fuyuki from now on. Altria found herself back on the day she pulled the sword from the stone. She held the sword of promised victory, standing among the crowd assembled around the Holy Grail. Out of all the knights present, few were more qualified to be king than she was, and yet she did not think herself fit. Tristan's words echoed in her mind. The king does not understand the hearts of men. Altria Pendragon felt the truth of it. She did not understand human hearts and feared she would be an unfit ruler. She had hoped the Grail would choose someone better. Clutching the sword's hilt, she resolved to support whoever the Grail picked and help govern Britain alongside them. As more knights climbed the platform, grasped at the sword, and stepped down in disappointment, anxiety gnawed at her. Why hadn't the one the Grail chose appeared? Had she made the wish incorrectly? She looked around, hand tight on the sword. The sun sloped lower, the crowd's enthusiasm cooled. She noticed Kay and Merlin casting anxious glances, but she remained still, determined to wait. Finally, the last knight descended, defeated. Merlin cleared his throat and smiled. Fate has a way of keeping us in suspense. The most suitable person always turns up at the last moment. Why doesn't that last knight who hasn't tried yet come come forward. He looked at Altria, amused. She forced a smile, suspecting that something had gone wrong with her wish. She was about to suggest waiting for more nights when a sudden surge of magic erupted above the stone. Brilliant light twisted space itself as two figures tore through time. A red-haired girl whose clothes fluttered in the wind, and a black-haired young man whose handsome, mysterious aura drew every eye. Everyone fell silent. The newcomer's presence felt like destiny. Altria's heart leapt. Ryan and Arii had arrived. If Ryan was the one to pull the sword, Britain would be safe. The crowd inexplicably agreed. The man who had appeared seemed perfectly suited to be king. But then the man reached forward and gently patted the red-haired girl's head. She stepped forward, slid her slender fingers over the hilt, and with a ringing cry drew the long sword free. She raised it high, joy lighting her face. The setting sun shone on her red hair and eyes. For a moment she seemed like a red dragon unfolding its wings. She pulled it. She pulled it out. Red hair, red eyes, could she be the red dragon of legend, the one to be our new king? But she's a woman. How can a woman be king? A flurry of protests rose from the knights. Merlin stared as if seeing a ghost. His sight had never shown him this. It was not what he and Uther had planned, but he clapped with delight. Interesting, very interesting. He would never be bored in the years ahead. The crowd, however, was not so accepting. Voices of doubt swelled into curse. We don't need a woman as king. Get down! How can someone of unknown origin lead us to victory? The murmurs of dissent were cut off as something unseen struck. The knights' curses recoiled back at them, and one by one they fell, writhing on the ground, mouths frothing, bleeding. Within moments, the earth was strewn with injured men. The uproar died into stunned silence. Even the sound of swallowing was loud. Fearful, the knights watched the two newcomers. Then a blonde woman stepped from the crowd. She lifted her battle skirt and dropped to one knee. I, Knight Altria, in the name of my order, hereby swear allegiance to the new king, King Arthur. I swear never to betray. I swear to be forever brave. I swear to defend these lands. I swear to protect the new king. Altria's vow rang through the crowd. Her dark blue eyes were steady and resolute. When she finished, she drew her longsword and presented it to Arii with both hands. Arii had seen many similar scenes in the Yasha household, but this one was different. It was an ancient European knight's oath of fealty. For a two-dimensional girl, it was a dead-on surprise. Arii's small face tightened as her eyes shone. She took the longsword and, as solemnly as she could, pressed the flat of the blade lightly against Altria's shoulders. I feel your loyalty, Knight Altria. From this day forth, you shall be my chief knight. Leon, standing nearby, couldn't help but smile. The moment felt almost absurd to him. The real King Arthur had become a knight, and the solemnity on Aries and Altria's faces looked strange, no matter how he regarded them. After the brief ceremony, Aerie did not hand the sword of promised victory back. Instead, she plunged the sword in the stone into the earth and drew from her waist the oath sword Leon had forged for her. The two swords of promised victory crossed above her brow. She shouted, Excalibur! During her time in the Age of Gods, the Holy Grail's power had altered Aerie. She gained magic circuits and the heart of a red dragon. Now using the curry stick, she unleashed both oath swords at once. Golden pillars of light shot straight into the sky, parting the clouds and sending rings of radiance across the land. In that moment, Aerie stood like a descended god. The knights had no more doubts. This was their new king. Thus the legend of King Arthur belonging to Aerie began. After she drew the sword from the stone, the months moved fast. First month, King Arthur Aerie Pendragon dispatched her first and greatest general, Altria, to sweep southern England. Within a month, the great red dragon had entered Camelot, the White City, and used it as the base to bring the fractured realms under one banner. Second month, when Altria's forces met fierce resistance, King Arthur transformed into a towering figure and subdued enemies with a miraculous light, the full moon wave. Wherever that light touched, even the most corrupt lords were deeply moved. They fell to their knees and rasped out confessions of guilt. Third month, the scattered cities and petty kingdoms fell under King Arthur's command. The reputation of the King of Knights spread across Britain. Those who heard it were struck and inspired. Knights and heroes from every corner donned armor and rode to Camelot, to swear fealty to King Arthur, the King of Eternity. Thus, the Knights of the Round Table were formally established. Chief Knight Altria raised her sword diagonally to the east and swore she would never allow anyone to betray her king. Because Altria was so rigidly upright and selfless, rumors began to circulate among the order. The Chief Knight does not understand human nature. Fourth month, winter arrived, and the strains caused by the rapid conquests burst forth. Many city residents lacked clothing and food. The levied troops were an unruly assortment. At this point, Ares' second strategist, Merlin, white-haired and pragmatic, proposed abandoning outlying towns, shortening the defenses, and concentrating forces to stop the Anglo-Saxon advance from the north. He was bluntly slapped down by the chief strategist, Leon, who mounted the stage and declared that the king was chosen by heaven and therefore would receive divine favor. That day, rice and meat fell from the sky and inundated Camelot. It is said that Chief Knight Altria wept that night. She held a chicken leg in one hand and rice in the other, and ate from dusk until deep into the night, proclaiming she had never been so happy. The next morning, convoys laden with food streamed out of Camelot for miles. From then on, the world bowed, and none in Britain failed to praise the benevolent name of King Arthur Ares. Fifth month, Britain's armies pushed north, scattering the Saxons and reclaiming lost lands. Sixth month, the white dragon Vortigern finally struck back, sending forth an army, which was routed. He came onto the field himself and was subdued by the full moon wave. With that, Britain attained peace and stability. Yet Ares had no appetite for further conquest. When knights like Kay and Gawain urged her to press on and seize Rome, she refused. Years slipped by. Britain reached the end of the Age of Gods. The great decline of mystery hindered production and life. In response, Leon opened a dimensional world and called it Avalon, the Eternity. King Arthur Ares led all her people into Avalon so they might find everlasting peace. It's said that after entering Avalon, King Arthur Ares refused to marry and in a fit of pique set up a constitutional monarchy with Altria as prime minister. Leon read the legendary biography in his hand and shrugged. What's the issue? King Arthur fades as the Age of Gods wanes and withdraws from history. It all reads like myth. How could this even be a singularity? Before Leon stood Fujimaru Ritsuka and Mash from Chaldea. Not long before, the two had trespassed into Avalon, been captured by Altria, and brought before Leon. This singularity doesn't affect proper history much, Fujimaru said, but the doctor said you could help us save the world. The doctor said? Leon mused. The counterforce must have spoken through him. The counterforce, it seemed, had chosen to be polite. It didn't call on Leon directly, but through an intermediary. Incineration of human history. Simple. Leon snapped his fingers. The scene around them shifted, and they felt themselves pulled outside the universe. Before Altria and the others even had time to comprehend the string of world bubbles that appeared, Leon plucked a small cluster from the weave of universes with a casual wave. Those singularities are now independent from proper history, he said. They will no longer affect proper history. The incineration of human history is over. Fujimaru was stupefied. Could a doomsday crisis be ended so matter-of-factly? She blurted, then what about Goetia? Goetia. Leon glanced in a certain direction, and the architect of the catastrophe dropped dead on the spot. There, he's dead. You can go back. With another snap, Fujimaru Ritsuka and Mash were returned to Chaldea. Years passed. Chaldea came to Leon again, pleading for help against Lost Belts and alien deities. Leon only half smiled. What, Lost Belt? Alien god invasion? You really think I'm your savior? This time he did not personally intervene. He sent Ares and Altria instead. The four young women set out together, traveling through Lost Belts and resolving crisis after crisis. Ares was content to enjoy the sights along the way. Altria grew in stature after an encounter with another Lion King within the Round Table domain Lost Belt. When they returned to Avalon, a decade had passed. Leon emerged from seclusion on that day and exhaled. Phew, I've finally figured everything out. Come on, Ares, let's go find a gourmet world and eat something delicious. Gourmet? What gourmet? Altria, having heard, hurried over with shining eyes. Chapter 526, Chapter Food World. In the world of Toriko, in a lush patch of greenery, Ares leaned against a stalk of corn more than 10 meters tall. She held a pea pod 2 meters long in her arms and sliced it open slowly with the sword of promised victory. The blade slid through cleanly, and the pod unfolded to reveal clusters of clear, jelly-like spheres. Arii set her longsword down, picked up a piece of the jelly, and buried her face in it. When she looked up, her cheeks were puffed out, and she wore an expression of pure bliss. Not far away, Legiduo floated above on a corn leaf, plucking candy clouds from the sky with his mind. They were rainbow sweets, crispy and bursting with various flavors, ready to eat as soon as they were picked. The three of them nibbled quietly, enjoying a peaceful moment. Then the cornfield began to tremble. The ground shook as if something enormous was approaching, and wide leaves and stalks were swept aside. A 20-meter-long, big-headed fish pushed its head up through the foliage. Of course, the fish couldn't have come ashore by itself. Altria had hauled it in from the sea. Altria's true body had been sent back to the time of the selection by the Holy Grail, and she had kept the sword of promised victory. She was still small and compact. Compared to the fat-headed fish, she looked like an ant carrying a ham. She heaved with all her might, tossed the fish onto the ground, and the impact made the whole cornfield shiver. Leiji Duo, I'm back from hunting. We're eating this delicious fish today, she called, cupping her hands around her mouth. Her cowlick bobbed in the breeze. Her heart was already racing with excitement. The unfortunate fish stared up from beneath her foot with dead eyes, about to become dinner. You caught a fish, but why the extra adjective? Lejeduo complained from the corn leaf above, half crouched. Why not just call it a fish? Because it has to be delicious, Altria announced as she drew her longsword and began to make decorative cuts along the fish. She worked quickly, slicing one side, flipping it, slicing the other, then jumped down. Lejeduo, cook it fast or it won't be fresh. All right, honestly, I don't think one fish is anywhere near enough for you. Lejeduo grumbled, but his hands were busy. He spread a heat vision over the fish, giving it a full-body sauna, then sprinkled on a handful of cumin, chopped green onions, and chili powder. An irresistible aroma rose up. His command of heat had reached an expert level, though he treated seasoning casually. Oh, so fragrant. As expected, Lejeduo, your cooking is amazing. Altria sniffed, eyes shining, cowlick bobbing. Raised on an English farm where mashed potatoes and roast meat were the height of childhood delicacy, even the scent of cumin sent her into rapture. She tore off 2 fish bones, each 4 or 5 meters long, with succulent roasted meat clinging to them, and handed one to Lejeduo and one to Arii. It wasn't that she couldn't resist sharing. She knew exactly how to divide portions so the rest could remain hers. Then she pounced on the roast and began to devour it. Judging by her speed, Lejeduo figured the fish wouldn't last an hour. Dinner tonight is fish, Arii said, climbing up onto the corn leaf beside Lejeduo. She was used to Altria's appetite from their time in Camelot. When Lejeduo cooked well, Altria's usual lines were, "Delicious! Another bowl, please? Another bowl. Bring the pot over." Arii was about to take a bite of the steaming meat when Lejeduo stopped her. Tonight's dinner isn't just fish. Not fish, then is Altria having a pre-dinner dessert? Arii snapped back with a learned complaint. She's got the king's stomach. Lejeduo waved a hand. But there's something else. I've been working on an enhanced version of gourmet cells, so tonight we can eat something special. They had been in the world of Toriko for 2 days. This world was strange, born from a gourmet Big Bang. Once, gourmet gods had lived in the final land, endlessly indulging in exquisite food. Eventually, their appetites reached a limit, triggering the gourmet Big Bang. Gourmet energy dispersed and formed a cluster of universes filled with incredible delicacies. Some planets were literally composed of blocks of food. The original gourmet gods evolved into gourmet cell demons. When humans transplanted gourmet cells, they could grow stronger by consuming high-grade ingredients, but the demons inside the cells would also grow, and eventually the cells could turn on their host. When Lejeduo arrived in this world, the first thing he did was collect gourmet cells. They enriched his genetic diversity. After devouring them all with his black light clone, he discerned the true nature of gourmet cells and completed an upgrade. The new gourmet cells don't backfire, he explained, holding Arii's pale arm. They just keep absorbing gourmet energy and strengthen you. Once you reach a certain critical point, you'll feel fully satisfied. He placed his hands lightly on her and funneled his energy inward. A soft white mist enveloped Eri. Every cell in her body felt warmed and comforted. When Duo withdrew, an odd emptiness surged through her, quickly followed by a keen hunger, as if her body were calling for food. She blinked, then looked at Altria. Altria's definitely going to like gourmet cells, she said. Then she asked, so what are we eating? Let me see. Duo produced a stack of menus. These are the menus of some of the most famous gourmet hunters on Earth. We'll just run through them. But we'll need the right chef to bring out the best in these ingredients. Duo, your cooking is very good, Eri said. Duo waved a finger. There are culinary geniuses out there who, with a little training, could surpass me. And anyway, call me Duo. Eri nodded vigorously. Half an hour later, they found themselves in the world of food wars. Shokugeki no Soma. Duo sat at the head of a long table draped with a tablecloth, with Eri and Altria on either side. They waited for Naginiri Arena, one of the elite 10 of Totsuki Culinary Academy, to serve the dishes. Naginiri Arena was one of the most talented chefs in that world. Even near the end of the original tale, the protagonist hadn't surpassed her. 3 exquisite tuna dishes were brought out. Arena stood nervously at their side with her assistant. The moment those 3 appeared, a giant tuna weighing dozens of tons had been dumped in front of her. They had told her if she could cook it deliciously enough, they would consider hiring her as their private chef. If anyone else had offered that, Arena would have kicked them with her stocking-clad foot without hesitation. But facing these 3, she felt, irrationally, overwhelmingly, that this was an opportunity she could not afford to miss. Chapter 527. Chapter Journey ends. Under Naginiri Arena's nervous gaze, Leon was the first to pick up his chopsticks. He took a slice of tuna from the plate and put it in his mouth. The tuna melted against his tongue. Leon paused involuntarily. The slices had been prepared with many seasonings and accompaniments, but none overwhelmed the fish. Each element complemented the others, amplifying the core flavor to perfection. The juice, the springy texture, every detail was just right. The level of seasoning and ingredient treatment was unlike anything Leon had encountered before. Excellent. Truly excellent, he said. Congratulations, Miss Naginiri. You're hired. If you're willing, you can come with us. Really? Naginiri Arena's eyes widened. Joy lit her face, but then she faltered. May I ask where you mean by come with you? It's 2. Woo! A sudden whimper interrupted them. Altria, who had also been eating the tuna, had curled in on herself in her chair. Her cheeks flushed, her green-blue eyes shimmering like a pool of spring water. She squirmed. The white blouse tucked into her high-waisted skirt strained at the buttons as if they might burst. This taste, she gasped, twisting her slender waist. She looked decidedly unwell. Eri's face went blank with surprise as she quietly pushed the untouched tuna in front of her away. Leon glanced at Naginiri Arena. We're taking you somewhere where your talent for intoxicating people is actually useful, he said dryly. That's... Naginiri Arena's cheeks colored, but she stiffened with pride. What do you mean, intoxicating people? A true chef would never do such a thing. Altria's ravished expression was the greatest compliment the young chef could imagine. This all went back to the Little Chef world. After Lu Mao Sing, known simply as Little Chef, had been promoted to special grade chef and left Yanquan restaurant, Leon and his group tracked him down. They stopped the genius chef and his young girlfriend, challenged him to a cook-off, and offered him an invitation. The chosen ingredient was tuna. Lu Mao Sing made a stew. When he lifted the lid, a golden glow shot into the air. Naginiri Arena immediately accused him of slipping drugs into the food. But Liu's cooking didn't rely on flashy side effects. His dishes were pure and sublime. When Naginiri Arena took a bite, she started saying strange things about setting sail across the sea, the waves hitting her face, crisp and refreshing. Altria, who had learned to keep herself in check after a prior overreaction, had kept her head down for most of the meal, until she couldn't resist trying the tuna, and then she too burst into poetic praise of ocean sunlight and waves. Leon grinned and said, "All right, little chef, you're hired." Seeing the young man hesitate, "Of course your girlfriend can come too." Leon didn't stop there. He also visited the god chef Little Fugi world and recruited Little Fugi and his grandpa. Everyone returned to the gourmet food world, and a few of the best chefs began to work together processing extraordinary ingredients. Cooking huge, hard, or dangerous items is nearly impossible for ordinary bodies, so Leon enhanced the chefs with gourmet cells. After each chef ate, their strength surged. Grandpa Hong, Little Fugi's grandfather, ate Naganiri Erina's dishes and transformed into a muscular powerhouse, his clothes straining and tearing in the process. Dishes served, Little Fugi announced as he plated course after course. Appetizer, Ghost God's entrails. Soup, four-fin sailfish. Fish, puffer whale sashimi. Meat, drunken ox. 8 dishes in total. Even Altria, who had been a bottomless pit, sat satisfied when the meal ended. After dining, most of the group either closed their eyes to rest or immediately began training. The gourmet energy in the food kept strengthening their bodies with every passing moment. Days became a blur of hunting and feasting. Leon began targeting ever more powerful prey. The group's diet steadily escalated. They moved from puffer whales of modest capture level to capture level 48 mammoths, creatures whose loss could trigger ecological catastrophe, and eventually to the legendary 8 beast kings, each with capture levels above 6,000 and the power to destroy a planet with a casual strike. After consuming the flesh and blood of those 8 beast kings, everyone rose to cosmic level power. But Leon didn't stop there. He led the chef team into space. Planet-sized pufferfish, gourmet planets, ingredients harvested from beings called God, countless high-grade culinary treasures dotted the universe. Finally, at the end of their travels, they encountered a cosmic taipan snake, a creature with a capture level of 530,000 and a body over 80 million kilometers long. Its power grazed the threshold of a single cosmic entity. Leon fought it with his steel body, and their battle pushed to the edge of the universe itself. Tens of thousands of superclusters felt the effects of the clash. In the end, Leon had no choice but to go beyond physical force. He created a thought-forged universe, and only then did the cosmic taipan reasonably yield some of its flesh and blood. Liu Maosing, as head chef, prepared 108 dishes in the style of a Manchu Han imperial feast from that treasure of cosmic ingredients. When the feast began, each dish shone like a star with golden light. Even Leon's main body took a tremendous benefit from the meal. Altria and Eri underwent profound transformations, their lives altered by what they consumed. It was a magnificent gourmet journey, Leon said quietly some days later, but it must come to an end. He bid farewell to the chef team. I'll send you back to your own worlds. We'll meet again. Leon planned to relocate and merge all the worlds they'd reached into the biohazard world, so their paths were bound to cross again. The worlds Little Chef and Little Fugi had come from were set in the Qing dynasty. With their new strengths, returning home would inevitably reshape history. Naganiri Arena would return unrivaled in the culinary scene. Each of them had a brilliant future. Leon, meanwhile, continued traveling with Eri and Altria. Eri had earlier purchased access to more than 100 trials, so Leon led the two through over 100 different worlds. They bullied Quanzhen in under one person, averted an apocalypse in 13th Star, learned the little cosmic system in Saint Seiya, and observed the apostles in Neon Genesis Evangelion. The final leg of their wandering ended in the miniature garden of Problem Children Are From Another World, where Leon studied new cosmic architectures and countless biological genomes. Eri and Altria left their marks there, legends in miniature. After they left the miniature garden, Leon sent Eri and Altria back to their respective worlds and returned to the Resident Evil universe. The fusion of that new world had already begun, and his main body had been delayed for far too long. Chapter 528, Fusion of the Three Bodies. Leon had long ago learned to respect the fighting spirit of the world consciousness from the Resident Evil universe. As the saying goes, nothing ventured, nothing gained. From the very first meeting, he knew this entity was bold and unafraid to take risks, so he wasn't surprised when it again dragged in a colossal world. He even found it natural that this newcomer dwarfed the current biohazard world. It was therefore unsurprising that Leon had to swat away the pleading world consciousness. "Damn it," he muttered to himself. "After the last lesson, you still don't learn to slow down your seduction. no, you're pulling, of other universes. The neighbor the world consciousness had yanked in was the immense three-body universe. A world of that scale merging in was no trivial matter. Typically, two universes could only merge when their macroscopic and microscopic laws were fully synchronized. Otherwise, contact became a destructive collision. When the biohazard world had merged with the wandering Earth, it had been like a drop dissolving into an ocean because the biohazard world was tiny. This time, however, both worlds were vast, and the world consciousness was as reckless as ever. So the two universes were heading for a cataclysmic collision. Faced with the onrushing three-body universe, Leon abandoned the idea of a straightforward merge. By then, he had already learned, from the Type Moon world, how a universe could give birth to a parallel world. He chose instead to convert the three-body universe into a parallel world of the biochemical universe. The first step was to align the similar rules between the two universes. That proved not as hard as it sounded. Despite differences in laws and power systems, most universes shared basic physical principles: conservation of mass, interaction of forces, and so on. Using these commonalities as anchors, Leon forced the colliding three-body universe into an orbit around the biochemical universe. As it circled, it gradually transformed into the parallel world he needed. The biochemical universe once again narrowly escaped disaster. At the same time, the world merging accelerated the growth of Leon's Legeduo M-body stationed in the biohazard world. For a while, everything went smoothly. Decades passed, and the three-body universe neared complete assimilation, until something went wrong. What's happening? Have the physical laws of the three-body universe changed? Leon asked, stunned. Large swathes of the three-body world had indeed altered their rules. Processes that should have released heat now absorbed it. Collisions that should have exchanged momentum no longer behaved normally. Some changes were partial and strange: water freezing while absorbing heat, momentum stubbornly conserved in collisions that otherwise violated expectation, and many more deviations were too numerous to catalog. Leon immediately suspected internal chaos. He extended his consciousness into the three-body universe to investigate. He first saw a bizarre panorama: stars, planets, even black holes collapsing or behaving wildly as the gravitational constant shifted. Planetary debris and gaseous clouds drifted unchecked. Photons bent into strange clumps or flowed in beautiful curving arcs like water down a drain. The universe seemed on the edge of breakdown, everywhere physical collapse. Fortunately, the three-body universe contained many high-dimensional fragments. Leon didn't need to suppress the universe's rules to rewind events. He grabbed a nearby four-dimensional fragment and peered into the truth. The return to zero or civilization and other great powers detected that the universe's laws are being modified and that the universe's energy is experiencing anti-entropy growth, the fragment revealed. They suspect an external universe has targeted them and fear that the dark forest law applies between universes. So they've decided to scramble their own laws to avoid detection. Leon's face hardened. The three-body setting's dark, fatalistic reputation was justified. To avoid attracting invaders, they were willing to sabotage themselves. Yet this was not a novel self-destruction. In its infancy, the three-body universe had been an 11-dimensional paradise where light sped instantaneously across cosmic distances, a true Garden of Eden. But a peculiar trait of that cosmos caused high-dimensional space to be vulnerable to low-dimensional fragments. Any region influenced by a lower-dimensional fragment could spontaneously collapse into lower dimensions. Dimensional weapons, simple devices that encased low-dimensional fragments with technology, were easy to make and devastating in war. Launch one, and a civilization could be compressed into lower-dimensional existence. The thing was, using such weapons was a double-edged sword. Once part of a high-dimensional structure fell, other parts followed like dominoes until the whole collapsed to a lower dimension. Because the universe was vast, the collapse took enormously long, hundreds of millions or even billions of years, but it didn't stop civilizations from deploying these weapons. Over countless wars, the 11-dimensional cosmos had collapsed into the present 3-dimensional world. Civilizations like the Singer still used dimensional strikes. Thus, the 3-dimensional world was still sliding toward 2 dimensions. Given the dark forest mindset, Leon could understand, but not condone, the three-body civilization's self-sabotage. They were only twisting physical and mathematical laws and collapsing star systems. They hadn't yet deployed full dimensional reduction to 2 dimensions. But comprehension did not equal acquiescence. This universe was about to become his responsibility, and he would not allow its grim descendants to wreak havoc unchecked. Leon's main body ended its training in the myriad heavens and dove into the three-body universe, moving at superluminal speeds. Wherever he passed, chaotic physical laws were recalibrated, dying stars rekindled, planets torn apart by inverted gravity recoalesced. Under his guidance, the universe slowly returned toward its former order. Then he was ambushed. As he sped through the Rose Nebula, a region several light-years across began to collapse dimensionally around him. Simultaneously, the local mathematical laws snapped to new values. The speed of light slowed to an almost laughable 1 centimeter per second, while the gravitational constant between particles climbed by orders of magnitude. With light effectively frozen, everything in the region ground toward stasis. Photons that would travel ceased moving. Dust clouds stalled. Even as time crawled to a halt, the two-dimensionalization of space did not pause. The star field was being flattened into a plane almost instantaneously. Leon recognized the signature, a coordinated encirclement by one or more great civilizations, executing dimensional reduction precisely where he stood. Chapter 529, Dimensionality Reduction. Strike lower civilizations study rules, higher civilizations use rules. God civilizations change them. For a God civilization, no mathematical law or physical constant is sacred. There are no universal laws that cannot be rewritten. Anyone from such a civilization can, with casual steps, use technology to destroy or create galaxies. Making a sun, for them, is child's play. Gather 200 quintillion tons of hydrogen, spread it into a nebula, speed up the collapse, coax a protostar into ignition with a controlled nuclear detonation. It's trivial, no technical content at all for a God civilization. So when multiple God civilizations simultaneously moved against the same individual, nobody expected escape. Yet they watched, with growing alarm, as the target underwent dimensional reduction across the universe and did not die. He wore what looked like high-tech battle armor that generated an invisible field around him. To distant observers, the field functioned like a curvature engine, compressing space ahead and expanding it behind, allowing faster-than-light travel. But judging by the speed he reached, far beyond light speed, it was more than a mere warp drive. It apparently altered rules at a mathematical level. What truly terrified them was that he could reverse their modifications to the universe. Every outpost they sent to intercept him was wiped out instantly. Both the officer who issued the command and the one who executed it died on the spot. After repeated tests, the God civilizations concluded that the attack ignored distance in a way similar to technologies that exploit higher dimensional space. Just as we see 3 spatial dimensions and time as the 4th, in some higher dimensional framework, the invisible entanglement between objects is tangible. With technology that taps those entanglements, you can strike a target anywhere by manipulating their correlations. Such methods can still be used in a universe reduced to 3 dimensions, but they require colossal energy. The God civilizations could not understand why this being could use the method on a massive scale without apparent concern for energy cost. They all felt the cold, immediate threat to their survival. This was the dark forest law made literal. In the pitch-black forest of civilizations, you can never be sure whether an appearing presence brings goodwill or annihilation. The rational choice is to strike first. The return to Zeroers civilization in particular had not felt threatened in its long history. The moment they confirmed Leon as a hazard, every God civilization involved launched their attack. They watched nervously. They employed their most extreme measures. Mathematical rules were rewritten, physical laws subverted, time frozen, and space made to undergo dimensional reduction, especially spatial dimensionality reduction. Dimensional reduction is a chain reaction. If you do it actively, you accept that every corner of the universe will reduce in dimension. The difference is that the attackers prepare to survive the process and persist as lower dimensional beings, while the caught-off-guard victims are erased. The Coalition's plan hinged on that. Encircle Leon, force the reduction, and, having prepared themselves, survive while their enemy was lost. They even altered the starfield's constants to lower the effective speed of light to prevent any superluminal escape. They had put everything into this one seamless operation. Now all they had to do was wait for the sweep to finish. Instead, through every observational channel, Sophons among them, they saw something impossible. The being looked around a few times, flicked a finger in the void, and the collapsing universe began to snap back into form as if 3D printed from a blueprint. Space that had been flattening into 2 dimensions recovered. Local anomalies in the starfield repaired themselves. The speed of light returned to about 300,000 kilometers per second. The gravitational constant normalized. Every quantum strike, every fusion burst, every light particle salvo and black hole shot failed. The Rose Nebula reappeared in all its timeless magnificence, as if it had never been touched. The Coalition had been defeated, decisively, unbelievably. They could tolerate their other weapons failing. But how had the dimensional reduction been lifted, or more accurately, reversed? A time weapon, someone guessed. We have time weapons, but they couldn't resist dimensional reduction either. How did he do it? I suspect a means of creating matter and energy that violates conservation laws, another said. But how is that possible? The Return to Zeroers were stunned. If we opened diplomatic channels with him, could he restore the universe to 11 dimensions? One voice ventured. Then we wouldn't have to try to return the universe to 0 and restart it with a nuke bang. The suggestion was shot down almost immediately. Diplomacy later, others replied sharply. Right now we have to deal with him and whatever civilization supports him. On the communal observation feeds, the mysterious figure turned and stared directly at the instruments. It felt like a look aimed at the viewers themselves. Leaders in the highest councils of the god civilizations who met Leon's gaze felt their spirits sink into those dark eyes. One by one, they drained of vitality, their resolve collapsing like a breath gone cold. Meanwhile, Leon, near the Rose Nebula, continued to fly and methodically restore the rules and order of the universe. When his work finished, he transmitted a broadcast across the cosmos, informing every civilization above advanced level of the three-body universe's fate. It was about to become a parallel world. Then, before departing, he looked at Earth, not the one we inhabit, but Earth inside the three-body universe. At that point, the three-body Earth was still in the wall-facer stage. Wall-facers like Tyler and Ray Diaz were pursuing their plans. Wall-facers, such as Luo Ji and pseudo-saints like Cheng Xin, were in play. People there were not yet aware of the sweeping changes underway. Leon felt the instinct to interfere, partly to play the role of Deus Ex Machina, but he set it aside. There are grave guardians like Luo Ji and others like Cheng Xin, he thought. In the future, everyone will grow soft. Hard to judge now. He closed the idea and opened a spatial portal to leave the three-body universe. As he prepared to go, a new thought occurred to him. Tony and Banner, didn't they like to play the three-body virtual game endlessly and never finish it? He considered tossing them in for some hands-on experience. The two-way foil technology, however, would not be especially effective in the Marvel cosmos. Its essence is using a low-dimensional fragment to trigger a collapse in a higher-dimensional space. It exploits the specific rules of the three-body universe to drive dimensional reduction. Marvel has no equivalent concept of a higher-dimensional collapse. Its low-dimensional realm is the quantum realm, inhabited by quantum beings and quantum gods. Higher dimensions are the domain of abstract entities like eternity and the celestials. Beyond them lie other extra-dimensional realms, the territories of Shumagorath, Set, Dormammu, utterly unrelated in their rules. Placing the two-way foil there would likely result in its assimilation into those native laws, reduced to a tiny pocket space with no further function. That said, many other technologies from the three-body world remain highly adaptable. Inviting Tony to study them would not be a bad idea. Chapter 530, Kryptonian Gene Transformation. After depositing Tony from Marvel back onto Earth, Leon stopped paying attention to the war between Earth and the three-body universe. He returned to his ongoing program of integrating disparate worlds. This time, there were no god-level civilizations altering cosmic rules to interfere, so the process went smoothly. A few years later, with a tremor, the three-body universe fully converted into a parallel branch of the biohazard world. The authority of the biohazard world expanded accordingly, and Leon naturally assumed control. The world consciousness was pleased. Its authority had been diluted further, but it no longer felt like a dominant shareholder so much as an ordinary investor. It was even eager to link up with a few more universes. Leon declined. The world consciousness was too reckless to be trusted with free rein. It would make a fine mascot instead. Leon still had many worlds queued for integration. Whenever he traveled and arrived at a new world, he would seed a legieduo M-body. Except for a few exceptionally large worlds, those M-bodies had become world consciousnesses. Leon spent enormous energy either pulling those worlds into his remit or using his traversal ability to package them directly. Thus, the great project of universe integration began in earnest. He absorbed the boys and Naruto, then One Piece and God of Death. He didn't ignore worlds like Dragon Race, Stellar Transformations, and Under One Person. Type Moon tempted him, but its route was a vast multiverse, too difficult to take wholesale, so he only pulled a few singularities and lost belt branches. This wave of integration proceeded by shaping incoming material into parallel worlds. Several more years passed in a flash. On the periphery of the biochemical universe, more than 100 parallel universes now orbited. The world that had once been the size of 10 solar systems had become a behemoth. The world consciousness was ecstatic, but its authority still amounted to only the equivalent of 5 solar systems, no stronger than Alaya Gaia in the adjacent Type Moon singularity. If the world group were likened to the heavenly court with Leon as the Jade Emperor, the world consciousness and the others were now mountain and river gods. When Leon wanted them quiet, he tossed the world consciousness toward Alaya Gaia and let them argue amongst themselves. Meanwhile, Leon quietly studied the mechanics of integration. He let his consciousness sink into the fabric of the universe and felt the rule fluctuations of each world. He found a recurring pattern running through them, a commonality that looked like the essence of various rules, the source code of a cosmic program. If he could fully grasp it, perhaps no world would hold secrets from him. That, he supposed, might be the realm above all things. As the de facto world consciousness, Leon could make macroscopic and microscopic alterations to the world group. He began to introduce a concept of parallel world evolution rules borrowed from the infinity and eternity deities of Marvel and traces of the Type Moon root. The idea was to let each world spontaneously derive new parallel worlds, enabling the group to grow into an autonomous multiverse. Halfway through the transformation, he stopped. His understanding of the rules was insufficient. If he pushed the change through now, it would only spawn small, Earth-centered parallel worlds, not the expansive, self-propagating multiverse he wanted. He shelved the plan. Understanding rules required more accumulation. There was one project, however, that had finally borne fruit: his gene research. Leon rested in the Orion arm of the biochemical universe, positioned at the heart of a blue giant. The blue sun sharpened his mind and fired frequent inspirations. After more than 100 world traversals, after nearly a century traveling with Erii and Altria, he had at last integrated the Doomsday gene. He had not been crossing time intentionally. He had only taken advantage of differing time flows across worlds to sunbathe and study genes. In truth, most of his effort during that century had gone into comprehending different rule systems. The variety and opposition of those laws, far from confusing him, enriched his insight. Drawing on the 6 gem rules as a foundation and grafting ideas from other worlds, he began assembling his own architecture of laws. But gene research had lagged behind, and integrating Doomsday was the major breakthrough. Doomsday was an exceptional Kryptonian, embodying all Kryptonian abilities and vulnerabilities, yet possessing nearly immortal regenerative powers and the trait of continuously overcoming weaknesses and evolving. The moment Leon assimilated the Doomsday gene, his genetic level shot upward. Numbers climbed: 30,001, 30,002, then 40,000, 50,000, 60,000. His physical height, which had been a narrow 1.9 meters, swelled first to hundreds of thousands of kilometers and then surged further. Vast stores of universal energy gathered and were absorbed by him until his true body ultimately stabilized at an immense scale. on the order of tens of millions of kilometers. He didn't immediately cast any contraction spell. He wanted to feel the change. For creatures in the starry sky world, breaking through 60,000 genetic tiers to the second stage of gene transformation usually meant a larger body and greater energy reserves. Leon's transformation was different. When his Kryptonian bloodline reached that magnitude, it felt as if his entire inner world had changed. Every cell rejoiced like a sprouting seed. Every inch of skin yearned for the sun. He felt reborn, the sensation of a Kryptonian infant newly drawn into the light for the first time. Under that sun, he imagined new abilities could awaken at any moment. He hoped for powers that would aid his understanding of cosmic rules. At that instant, the telekinetic gene structures he had collected, bits and echoes of Professor X's telekinesis, Jean Grey's telekinesis, Cassandra's telekinetic template, and dozens more that he had analyzed, flooded into his awareness. Those gene signatures integrated into his body with uncanny naturalness, and an extremely potent telekinetic power came online. He recognized what this meant. His physiology and will were aligning with the archetype of the Silver Age Superman. He had always kept foreign genes separate to preserve the purity of the Kryptonian line. He had never intended to graft them into his core. But his body was conforming to his thought, incubating the abilities he now desired. These new faculties were born from knowledge and synthesis, not from magic ex nihilo. He was becoming a silver Superman, not yet fully the archetype, but moving unmistakably in that direction. When the telekinetic power awakened, his gene index ticked past 60,001. He deduced that the span from 60,000 to 90,000 genetic tiers was the process of evolving from an ordinary Superman into a silver Superman. He also sensed that his rate of advancement while sunning had increased again. Leon bathed simultaneously in the blue giant and the yellow sun from his world ring. Every cell shone with a golden glow as his genes accelerated toward the silver Superman threshold, and his overall power state quickened toward a golden Superman condition. Sunlight felt like a warm current running through his flesh. Suffused with that warmth, he closed his eyes and sank into a deep, restorative sleep at the core of the blue giant. Chapter 531. Out of the Sun. Leon! Leon! I've cleared the game. Come take me back. Inside the scorching blue constant star, Leon heard the distant call and slowly opened his eyes. It was Tony, calling from the three-body universe. They had agreed that when Tony decided to give up or was ready to leave, he would call Leon. Now that Leon was the world consciousness of the three-body universe, he could hear anyone calling from inside it. He was at the core of the blue giant. Intense nuclear fusion flared around him, the blue fire bathing his entire body and making him as translucent as the sky, but it could not wash out the golden light emanating from him. A faint reddish-gold glow shimmered from every cell. His hair, his eyes, even his breath carried that brilliant golden radiance, as if he had become a little man made of gold. It's been over 30 years. Leon took stock of himself, then stepped out of the blue giant and floated in the void. Without using any overt authority, he raised a hand. The entire cluster of universes in the biohazard world seemed to revolve in his palm. If he wanted, a simple clench could have destroyed hundreds of those universes. An apparently infinite power throbbed within him. His body felt as if it had become a world. Every cell, every drop of blood, was comparable to a vast, boundless cosmos. After his genes had been amplified 60,000-fold, and he had soaked in sunlight for more than 30 years, he had become unbelievably powerful. My physical strength has far surpassed that of a single entity. It's hard to give a precise estimate. Leon had fine control over his body. Under normal circumstances, even a simple gesture would reveal his power level down to the smallest unit. This time, however, he hesitated because he couldn't find a suitable unit of measurement. Measured on the scale of a single universe, my strength is already incalculable. And compared to the Marvel cinematic multiverse, he clenched his palm and let his mind run calculations. The number of operations his brain could perform per second now exceeded the total calculations of entire civilizations in a universe over hundreds of years. Not only had his steel body undergone a dramatic transformation, his superbrain, supervision, and other abilities had likewise grown immensely over the decades. After only a few seconds, he had an answer. It's roughly equivalent to 100 millionth of the scale of a cinematic multiverse. 100 millionth, on paper that's a small fraction, but a multiverse is effectively infinite. Even a 100 millionth portion of an infinite multiverse still carries an infinite character, and that was pure raw strength. If he deployed arcane arts and universal laws as well, Leon believed he could stand against high-end contenders in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Dormammu, Ceterak, even the Supreme Observer. Those multiversal-level entities would no longer be threats. In the current cinematic hierarchy, only a few beings still clearly outclassed him, figures like Shen Loki and the Life Tribunal. The comic book multiverse was a different story, a place he didn't need to worry about yet. With his current power, he would be a mid-tier contender at best in the 6th or 7th echelons there, far beyond where he needed to be for now. Leon felt pleased with his increase in strength. At the same time, he mused aloud, "Am I a Golden Superman now?" Golden Superman usually describes a Kryptonian who has fully absorbed the sun's energy. The original Golden Superman slept in the sun's core for 15,000 years. In that state, he approached the end of his evolutionary path and was rumored to have become a 5-dimensional being, DC's 5th dimension, the realm of imagination. He could ignore time paradoxes, freely create life, and alter reality. With a flick of his finger, he could spawn boundless universes. He had become nearly omniscient and omnipotent. In common perception, Golden Superman's power is multiversal. By contrast, the Silver Age Superman's greatest feat was defeating an anti-monitor spanning thousands of universes, an astounding single-entity accomplishment, but his portrayal left room for almost unlimited possibilities. The Silver Age Superman could have any ability one could imagine. His upper limits were effectively undefined. As an evolutionary stage for Kryptonian genes, that made sense. Above Golden Superman, there were still rare figures: Willpower Superman, our Superman, and the Supreme Little Superman. Willpower Superman once shattered a 6-dimensional multiverse with a single punch, exhibiting strength far beyond multiversal, and his limits depended only on how powerful he believed himself to be. Leon considered these comparisons while floating in the blue light. He had reached heights that would have been unimaginable a few decades ago. The sun had remade him into something that approached the legendary golden state, though naming himself was less important than understanding the scope of his abilities. For now, he was content to know he could walk into multiversal theaters and not be intimidated, and that he could still grow. He turned his attention back toward the 3-body universe, where Tony's voice still echoed, and prepared to respond. Chapter 532, Chapter 3, Body Universe, Earth's Changes. The Superman of idealism was already unbelievably powerful. In reality, though, Supreme Little Superman was even stronger. Before he had even reached adulthood, he could hold his own against every superhero on Earth. When he matured, his power hit its true peak. He could alter reality by physical means. In other words, with his fists and kicks, he could change the laws of the universe. His greatest feat was severely injuring the multi-cosmic level Batman Who Laughs with a single punch. The aftershocks alone could have destroyed 52 dark multiverses. In the Marvel scale, Supreme Little Superman ranked at least as a supercosmic powerhouse. Infinite multiverses form a supercosmic, and infinite supercosmics form an omnipotent universe. Everything flickered through Leguo's mind at once. Golden Superman was truly the endpoint of evolution. He had absorbed enough sunlight to unleash his potential to the extreme. Of course, different Supermen had different potentials. Leguo could feel his cells still craving sunlight. He had a long way to go before his own evolution had ended. He wasn't yet a Golden Superman. He knew that even if he basked in the sun for ages, becoming a Golden Superman outright might still be out of reach. As he continued to study and rewrite his genes, their potential would only grow more unfathomable. Still, his current state had undoubtedly been transformed on the level of life itself. After leaving the blue giant star, the world as Leguo perceived it had changed dramatically. Before, when he surveyed the universe through his strongest Reg Duo clone, he saw the essence of the cosmos and how its rules operated. Now, in his own body, he didn't have to peer closely for secrets to reveal themselves. They unfurled automatically. His realm of power had risen so high he was almost omnipotent within the universe. Omnipotence naturally brought omniscience. For the first time, he understood what Golden Wolf Superman meant when he casually pointed and increased his genes 1,000-fold. When Legieduo looked at his own genetic structure, countless evolutionary directions and their predicted outcomes surfaced in his mind every instant. His 60,000-fold genome was evolving toward 90,000. He was likely on the trajectory toward Silver Superman. The countless gene templates he had gathered across different worlds finally found uses. Legieduo made only a small calculation, and his gene level crept upward again. 60,002, 60,003. His genes improved a little every few seconds. As the gene level approached 70,000, each increment required more complexity, and the improvements slipped from every few seconds to every few minutes. He didn't get lost in research, though. After splitting off a portion of his consciousness to continue the genetic work, he left to go to the three-body universe and pick up Tony. As soon as he entered the three-body solar system, differences hit him. Decades ago, this Earth had been in a surface civilization stage. They'd just selected 4 wall-facers to face the Trisolaran threat. Now, swarms of cosmic battleships and steel automatons hung beyond the major planets. Their power sources were arc reactors, their engines curve engines. The basic weapons were high-tech systems, gamma-ray lasers, high-energy ion beams. Most strikingly, many curve-engine vessels patrolled the system, their trajectories weaving a dark domain. Within that domain, the effective speed of light was drastically reduced. Photons could not escape the sun's gravitational influence to flee the solar system. Civilizations beyond the system would therefore regard this star's civilization as non-threatening. For Earth, that was an optimal solution against the dark forest law. Legieduo hadn't expected Tony to find a solution like that. But if a defense against the dark forest had been discovered, what would it mean for dealing with the Trisolarans? He scanned the system and suddenly noticed a Trisolaran, invisible to ordinary three-dimensional beings, closing in. It unfolded on his retina like a subtitle. "How about it? I told you we could clear this time, Legieduo." That cocky tone gave it away. Tony was controlling that Trisolaran. Legieduo smiled ruefully. In a few decades, Tony had even analyzed and replicated Trisolaran tech. With a thought, Legieduo appeared in a command room on Earth and stood in front of Tony. Golden Superman could travel time and space at will. Legieduo hadn't reached that pinnacle, but feats like this were still easy for him. "You did well," Legieduo said, reaching out to pat Tony's shoulder. "You even studied the Trisolarans and the curve engine." Tony's shoulder twitched in surprise, then he gave Legieduo an exasperated look. The others in the command room were far less relaxed. "Intruder! Damn it! Let go of Mr. Stark! Drop your right hand, intruder! Warning, drop your right hand!" Researchers and security alike drew weapons simultaneously and aimed at Legieduo. Some tapped their wrists. Smart nanomaterials unfurled into anti-Superman armor. Tony had become Earth's priceless asset. Every major technological creation bore his shadow. "Relax, everyone," Tony said with a smile, patting Legieduo's hand away. "This is my younger brother, a bit mischievous. Don't scare him." Legieduo's skin was still faintly golden. "Why are you glowing? Did you eat a star? Damn, when did I discover you like sun-chowing more than sunbathing?" "Don't blame them. You appear out of nowhere all gold and shiny. You'd pass for an alien invader," Tony teased. Legieduo shrugged and let the energy in his body converge. His golden glow dimmed. "Stars are mostly hydrogen and helium. Not that tasty. Nuclear fusion burns your mouth. It's got a nasty kick." The others blinked. "So, wait, you didn't become a Golden Superman, did you?" "Not yet," Legieduo said, pinching his fingers a hair's breadth apart. "But almost." Tony's eyes widened. For a few beats he stared, then slapped his forehead. "Damn it, I thought my anti-Superman armor had come far enough in these decades." Across the three-body universe's decades, Tony had incorporated many high-tech advances into his armor, thinking he could at least keep pace with Legieduo. Seeing him this close to Golden Superman stung. "Don't be discouraged," Legieduo said. "You couldn't catch up with my shadow before. Nothing's changed." Tony's face darkened. "You better not get any faster this quickly, or I'll catch up to you sooner or later." "Then I'm sorry. I'll only get stronger faster." They exchanged their usual barbs. Then Legiduo asked, "So, have you finished the mission to save Earth?" Tony's grin widened. He cleared his throat and turned to the control panel, clearly ready to show off. "In 2010 on Earth, I was at the United Nations Planetary Defense Council," Tony began, sounding like a man who'd won a championship on his first try. He stared at the holographic projection, blue light reflected in his eyes, and assumed the air of an old sage about to tell a legend to children at his feet. Leon's eyelid twitched. The moment Tony's mouth curved, he knew something outrageous was coming. He cut Tony off on purpose. "Wait, Tony. Just wait." Tony was taken aback and almost bit his tongue. His solemn storyteller act evaporated in an instant. He glared at Leon, annoyed. This brat was clearly disrupting him. "Don't look at me like that, Tony. Now isn't the time for idle chatter. I need to treat your researchers." Leon met Tony's glare without flinching and waved his hand. Golden motes of light scattered through the command room. The pale faces around them slowly flushed back to normal. A moment earlier, everyone had been shaken and sick from the backlash of Leon's passive ability. After some modifications, the skill Killing Intent Rebound had become much more flexible. It now automatically delivered a counterblow proportional to the malice directed at Leon. If the old version had triggered when everyone pointed guns at him, they would have been bleeding everywhere. The current version was kinder, internal injuries and a few fractures, painful but survivable. "I suddenly felt a lot of pain, but I'm fine now," someone muttered. "Me too. Was that some invisible attack?" another asked. The quiet hum of the command room erupted into whispers. They'd all assumed their sudden pain had some personal cause. Only when they compared notes did they realize the likely source was the young man who'd appeared beside Tony. Everyone looked at Leon with a mixture of awe and wariness. Tony, too, was surprised. "What was that? Your nanobots, Leon? You secretly attacked them?" "Secretly attacked?" Leon blinked. "Haven't seen it before, have you? Amazing, right?" He gave a short, smug explanation. "This ability is called Killing Intent Rebound." Then, with a mysterious half-smile, he went on. "By the way, before you sent me here, I traveled around this universe a bit. Some great god civilizations came sniffing around," he said. "I didn't do anything, but they got terrified by this ability and trembled." "You ask what a great god civilization is? They're just a few star systems stronger than the three-body civilization." Tony leaned on the table and listened while Leon riffed on cosmic power rankings. He wanted to snap that he never asked what a great god civilization was, but instead he felt a sudden dryness in his throat, picked up a glass of water, drained it, poured another, and kept drinking. After 3 glasses, Leon finally stopped his tangent and asked, casually, "By the way, where were you just now, Tony? You sounded like you were talking about joining the Planetary Defense Council?" Tony's sudden enthusiasm drained away. His smile faltered into a kind of tired silence, like the gray stillness after a summer storm. Leon had already beaten up a great god civilization. Talking about three-body strategies suddenly felt trivial. "What council? Kid, what are you doing here?" "Oh, right, you're here to take me back, aren't you? Let's go then," Tony said, pushing to leave. But as Earth's foremost scientific mind now, a proper farewell was expected. After a farewell dinner with Luoji, Shiqiang, and Wade, some familiar faces, Tony and Leon departed the three-body world. At the banquet, Tony had drunk a few glasses of gin, and in the half-drunken glow he had, with evident pride, recounted how he'd saved Earth. On Earth, Tony said he'd joined the Planetary Defense Council and become the 5th wall-facer. He'd used Jarvis to infiltrate the Sophon, lifting Sophon's technological blockade and then launching a counter-invasion into the three-body fleet's intelligence systems. From that day, Earth and the three-body civilization had switched places in offense and defense. Tony voraciously absorbed three-body technology, built the Water Drop Project on Earth, and constructed Earth's own Sophon. With the advanced physics knowledge he got from the three-body world, his inspiration exploded. Soon the curve engine was developed. A United Nations stellar fleet was assembled regardless of cost. The other 4 wall-facers' plans stalled in the wake of Tony's breakthroughs. The whole planet rallied around his research. The ETO, hiding in the shadows, tried to assassinate him, but Jarvis controlled Sophon and preempted their plots. As soon as ETO operatives hatched a scheme, United Nations forces arrested them before they could leave their safe houses. Earth then launched a preemptive counter-encirclement strike. Whether a civilization can reach light speed marks a major civilizational leap. With the curve engine, Tony also developed a family of light particle weapons that used velocities near light speed. The three-body civilization stood no chance. To prevent the three-body people from broadcasting Earth's coordinates across the universe before they were wiped out, Earth struck without warning and finished the fight in an instant. The three-body fleet was gone before it could react. Its ships became nothing more than fireworks in the dark. A light particle shot ignited their star. The entire three-body system was destroyed in a flash. After the war, Tony proposed an unsettling dilemma to the United Nations. Destroying another star system might leave remnants, radiation, anomalies, smoke that could betray Earth's existence to other advanced civilizations. Earth now faced a choice: seal itself off with the curve engine, creating a black domain and sending only non-threatening signals, or step out into space, rely on light-speed engines, and grow stronger openly. The nation held a long debate and then a referendum. In the end, Earth chose to broadcast non-threatening signals to the cosmos. Tony didn't approve. If this had been his Marvel Earth, he would have argued vehemently. But he'd seen the future of this world in the virtual game. He felt he had no right to force the outcome. He remembered how, in the game, he and Banner and their online companions used to say one common thing: no matter what happened to the three-body world, Cheng Xin had to be taken along before the end. Tony had no reluctance about leaving the three-body universe. He'd never felt much at home among the people there, and if Leon hadn't promised that traveling through those worlds would bring them into contact with true higher civilizations, he never would have come. At home, his little princess was still waiting to say, "I love you 3,000" to him before bed. That's right, Tony and Pepper's baby had been born, and she was a girl. They'd kept the name Leon had originally given her, Morgan Stark. When Leon first traveled between worlds and then returned to the Marvel Universe, he hadn't jumped timelines so much as exploited differences in the flow of time to grow stronger quickly. After he passed through hundreds of worlds and separated from Aerie, more than 3 years had gone by when he came back to the Marvel Universe. Morgan was already 2.5. Leon had gone back once when she was born and given her a Legioduo transformation necklace, but he hadn't seen her since. Tony had been away from his little girl for over 3 years and was desperate to get back. "Leon, don't mess this up. Remember, it has to be a time jump, back to the exact moment we left." Tony repeated inside the three-body mansion. He did not want to return to find a teenager, or worse, a 30-year-old, Morgan. If he missed her childhood, he swore he'd strangle Leon and then himself. Got it. We'll land at the exact moment we departed. You won't be out of little Morgan's sight for more than 10 seconds, Leon promised, his hand on Tony's shoulder as he activated his traversing ability. They passed through the long, chaotic void between worlds and punched through the Marvel Universe's barrier. Leon's vision snapped into focus, and a familiar sight resolved itself: the cliffside mansion in Los Angeles. When they had left earlier, the family of 3 had been vacationing at their old home here. Leon glanced at the French windows. Below the cliff, the sea shimmered in the afternoon sun. "Tony, we're back, exactly when we left. Absolutely." He broke off, turning as Tony slumped in his arms. "All right, you're out cold again." Tony had passed out during the traverse. Leon carried him toward the bedroom, paused at the doorway, grinned, and then lowered himself to half squat. "Hi, Morgan. Long time no see." On the second floor, a chestnut head peeked from around the stair corner. Who else could it be but Morgan? She poked half her face out, wide-eyed and curious. "But we just saw each other a minute ago, Leon." She bit her index finger and in a soft, milky toddler voice asked, How is Daddy on your shoulder?" The 2-year-old stumbled up the steps as she tried to find the word shoulder. "You mean, Tony? Your daddy stayed up too late last night and suddenly fell asleep. I need to take him to bed so he can rest," Leon said gently. Facing Morgan, he let a rare softness show. "Is that okay?" Morgan shuffled up to him, her big eyes full of inquiry. "Okay. Morgan, why don't you say good night to your daddy?" Leon ruffled her hair and scooped the little girl into his arms. But Daddy is already asleep, she said. That's fine. You tell me what to say, and when he wakes up, you can tell him yourself. Morgan cocked her head at the idea of relaying a goodnight and then nodded solemnly. Okay then. Good night, Daddy. Leon, you have to tell Daddy for me. I will, but not that one line. Leon smiled. How did you say goodnight to Daddy last night? Morgan cupped her cheeks and thought for a beat. I said, I love you 3,000. Leon laughed. Haha, do you only love Daddy and not your dear Uncle Leon? Morgan blinked. Also love. Then how many times? Also, 3,000. Morgan declared earnestly, counting on fingers far beyond what she really understood. Tony had once heard an Iron Man from a parallel world say 3,000 and had liked it, so after Morgan was born, he would lie next to her and repeat, I love you 3,000, until she learned it. Leon grinned mischievously. To Uncle Leon, you have to say, I love you 5,000. 5,000? Morgan echoed the strange new number, chewed it over for a moment, then nodded with toddler seriousness. Love Daddy 3,000 times. Love Uncle Leon 5,000 times. Leon laughed out loud, set the sleeping Tony gently on the bed, and carried his little niece downstairs. He was already picturing how he'd tease Tony when he woke. Morgan is so well behaved. Come on, let's go find Mommy. Can I have ice cream? Morgan tugged at her lip with a sly little glint in her eyes. Even at 2, she had learned how to use charm. As the child of Tony Stark, she was sharp for her age. Leon indulged her. Ice cream? You clever thing. Okay, Uncle will take you. Cloud ice cream. Leon pulled a floating cloud-like scoop from his world ring. He'd stored foods from the Toriko world there, and Morgan gasped in delight. He waited until Tony stirred and walked out of the bedroom at him, then showed off to the groggy father. She said, I love you 3,000, and I love Uncle Leon 5,000. Tony could only respond with an exasperated, half-amused grumble as Leon bragged. After a few more moments at the mansion, they left Los Angeles again. In the 3 years that followed, Earth changed significantly, and the whole multiverse changed even more. Though Leon already had hundreds of millions of M-bodies planted across countless universes, he rarely took direct action. He usually chose a single human host and left behind a cosmos or justice transformation device, stepping in personally only when a crisis threatened to destroy an entire universe. Those universe-scale crises had always been rare. Major villains like Thanos and Ultron rarely succeeded across the multiverse. But over the past 3 years, in worlds where Leon's M-bodies were stationed, universe-destroying events started appearing with increasing frequency. And they had something in common: world collisions. Leon hunted for the source, and all the clues kept pointing toward Dr. Stephen Strange. In some universes, even after Leon took control of Strange, collisions still occurred. It felt as though an invisible giant hand had reached across the multiverse, manipulating entire worlds. Chapter 535, Kamar Taj Invades Hell. On that question, Lion had consulted Eternity through one of his M-bodies. Eternity exists in every Marvel universe. He sits above the Eternity dimension and looks down on the whole universe. By normal logic, Eternity should be the greatest intelligence in the MCU. But he said flatly, the mastermind? I don't know. You exist in every universe, Lion objected. How could you not know? Eternity yawned, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. My M-bodies generally don't share consciousness. Have any of my M-bodies died recently? Of course, when a universe is destroyed, an M-body dies. Many die every day. He was almost amused by it. Eternity was apathetic. His manifestations didn't even share awareness. No wonder that when a real crisis came, on-the-spot appearances could be fatal. Lion had to give up trying to squeeze useful information from someone who treated cosmic calamity like a minor inconvenience. To entities that predated the multiverse, the death of a universe or the passing of a single M-body mattered no more than a person finding a few stray hairs on their pillow. Even so, Lon still mentally scolded Eternity. Eternity had warned him a crisis was imminent and urged him to get stronger, yet the being himself spent his downtime loafing in his dimensional world. Eternity only smiled and suggested Lion send some M-bodies to the neighboring multiverse. Lion had no choice but to accept that shrug and move on. That conversation with Eternity had happened around the time Morgan was born. In the intervening years, Lion's reduo clones had saved tens of thousands of universes, Their numbers had swelled into the hundreds of millions. The Rege Duo clones were growing stronger at a terrifying rate. If villains like Dormammu or Satanish saw them, they'd be green with envy. Yet the clones still weren't as powerful as Lion's main body. The main body had undergone 2 leapfrog upgrades in genetic level and had spent a long time basking under the sun. It had now reached a weak cosmic tier, far beyond the life plane of the Rege Duo clones. Fortunately, with the main body's ascent, Lion's soul will had surged again. He could now deploy far more M-bodies. He knew that wherever his M-bodies couldn't reach, more universes were being destroyed by world collisions. Saving each world meant gaining another tiny source of power. Small as it was, it still counted. In this crisis of colliding multiverses, Lion thought he might be one of the biggest beneficiaries. Still, the frequency of collisions was increasing, and that worried him. 3 years ago, among all the universes his M-bodies observed, only his main world had ever suffered a collision. Now, among the more than 100 million universes under observation, tens of thousands had experienced collisions. It was entirely possible his own universe would be next. Could the mastermind be the Transcenders? He couldn't rule it out. In the comics, collisions that destroyed the multiverse were the Transcenders doing. They hadn't appeared in the MCU yet, but who knew whether, while dismantling a neighboring multiverse, they might conveniently start a fire here too. If it truly were the Transcenders, the God Realm dimension could afford only a temporary refuge. Lion simply wasn't strong enough. He sighed. His current level was cosmic, but against the Transcenders, it was insignificant. The Transcenders are indirect creations of the comic Celestials, and in the Marvel tradition, creations often exceed their creators. Don't be fooled by the label. When the Transcenders slaughtered the Celestials, they did it fast and without mercy. They exist in the transcendent realm beyond the multiverse. The strongest among them, the Ivory Kings, were said to have killed 4 abstract entities and even the Life Tribunal. Later comics made that look like a staged show, but the Ivory King's omniverse-level power is hard to deny. Even so, Lion didn't panic. Those beings might never touch the movie universe. And if they did, and he couldn't beat them, he could run. He could even pack up the God Realm dimension and leave, if necessary. Pushing the worry aside for now, Lion teleported directly to Kamartaj. He didn't go home. The compound was already empty. Everyone from his household was in the small world of Kamartaj, or more precisely, in an interdimensional chamber within that small world. That chamber had been created by Darkstrange to manage incoming and invading dimensions. Darkstrange was admittedly off-putting, paranoid, eerie, like an old ghost. But he was supremely capable, pragmatic, and hard-working, a perfect field commander for Lion. 3 years earlier, after reporting to the God Realm dimension, Darkstrange had been given a tedious, grueling assignment: neutralize Mephisto and other dimensional demon gods and seize their realms. To occupy Hell and those other alien dimensions, you first had to weaken the demon gods' hold on their realms. That was a long, energy-consuming process that often seemed nearly impossible. Lion had suppressed a group of demon gods years before, but had not tried to take their dimensions because the effort was too costly and too likely to invite trouble. The Eye Demon might notice, or other greedy demon gods might swoop in. With Darkstrange at his disposal, however, Lion could change tactics. Darkstrange, a figure capable of becoming a major adversary in an alternate what-if season, had many tricks. He considered several approaches: lure the dimensional demon gods out of their realms and repeatedly kill them to weaken their control, or force a direct assault into the dimensions and slay the demon gods outright. After sizing up Lion's resources, Darkstrange hit on a cunning plan. He would carve an interdimensional space at the edge of the small world, then force open a passage into the demon god's realm. He would personally spearhead the incursion, rushing into the demon god's dimension to confront the deity, while the sorcerers of Kamartaj followed behind to clear out the dimensional creatures. Mass slaughters of those creatures would further erode the demon god's control over his realm. And crucially, the sorcerers could pay the casting costs of their spells by consuming the life energy of the slain dimensional beings. Darkstrange's plan would both help Lion seize dimensions and train his forces, 2 objectives achieved at once. At first, Wong and Karl Mordo had been wary of the eerie newcomer, but once Kamar Taj went to war with Mephisto, the sorcerer's reservations evaporated. After all, being able to slaughter Hell's demons as a means of paying for their magic was a very comfortable arrangement. Chapter 536, Mephisto's Chilling Realization. Before dark, Strange arrived. The wizards of Kamartaj had already begun muscling in on the work of police and firefighters around the world. They weren't the only ones. Men in Black teams also had copies of Leon's newly compiled spellbooks, and they too threw themselves into disaster relief and criminal apprehension to earn casting costs. Yelena even suggested offering Earthling humanitarian aid to aliens who landed here. But no matter how many channels they tried, there were only so many disasters on Earth. Wizards and men in black traveled the globe performing good deeds, yet still couldn't accumulate enough experience to cast higher sequence spells. Dark Strange's arrival opened a new avenue for emergency relief. At first, only the Kamartaj wizards followed him into Hell. Later, the men in black joined as well. When Leon entered the interlayer space of the small world, he found himself in a pocket dimension several kilometers across. Its barrier shimmered in 6 colors: blue, yellow, orange, purple, green, and red, the hues of God Realm dimensional energy. This was the energy Dark Strange had taken from devoured dimensional creatures, and after Leon refined it, transformed into those 6 colors. Even so, Dark Strange hadn't perked up. The dark rings under his eyes remained, and he still looked half zombie. In the pocket space, only a few wizards sat cross-legged, wounded to the bone. Those injuries would have been fatal to an ordinary man, yet the wizards barely reacted beyond occasional gasps. Their worst wounds were visibly knitting back together. Leon recognized the effect at a glance. The Sequence 1 spell in his book, Self-Healing Factor. The wounded wizard spoke between gasps. Some bragged that killing one more Hellhound today would earn enough contribution points to buy a single use of Magneto's power. Others complained that Hell's succubi needed to be pierced by Cyclops' optic blasts, but they didn't have enough points. Contribution points were a quantified magic cost currency Leon had set up with Old Wang and Jarvis's help. Originally, Leon hadn't planned a system, but after his experiences in the Dragon Race world and returning to Marvel to celebrate Morgan's birth, he'd conveniently implemented one for the wizards. Now, every time a wizard did good or repelled dimensional incursions, they earned contribution points. The baseline Wolverine self-healing cost 1 point per use. A Skyfather-level steel body required 100,000 points. Leon didn't disturb the resting wizards. He phased through the spatial passage into Hell itself. Hell lived up to its name. The sky and ground were dim, and demon blood stained everything. Over 100 wizards flew high above the battlefield. Dozens of magnetocasters manipulated metal to blast hellish dragons from the sky. More than a dozen telekinetics crushed demons with sheer force. Those who couldn't afford magneto or telekinesis had bought mutant wings feathered in white and swept the skies with Cyclops-like optic beams. On the ground, hundreds more unleashed all kinds of magic: matter conversion, vector manipulation, electromagnetic control. Traditional spellcasters still wielded holy swords or mirror dimension tricks. Some frugal wizards even siphoned Hell's own energy to use as weapons. Leon's contract with Mephisto allowed Kamartaj to draw on Hell's power freely. Facing these hundreds of wizards, Hell's lesser demons fled in droves. The ground lay piled with purple and green-blooded corpses. The Kamartaj invasion of Mephisto's Hell had been underway nearly 3 years. What once seemed like an infinite supply of demons had been butchered down almost to nothing. That loss hardly mattered to Hell. Mephisto could remake demons with Hell energy. What he couldn't do was fight on all fronts at once. The wizards fought around the spatial passage. Deeper in, Hulk, Diana, Kara, and others battled greater demons, Blackheart-level foes, and water terrors. They died and were reborn in endless cycles until they'd gone numb. Even that place was only the periphery. The true core of fighting lay further in, an area now almost a void. Hell's lava and dim space rendered into a black emptiness where matter had been annihilated. Light and sound seemed unable to escape. Not even ordinary wizards, or Diana and company, could imagine what had happened there. Leon's gaze scanned the battlefield and settled on that void. In its center stood Dark Strange and Infinite Ultron. No, Infinite Jarvis. The two of them were jointly confronting Mephisto. In hell, Mephisto was terrifyingly powerful, super individual tier, and perhaps not that much weaker than Infinite Ultron. But facing two super individuals was a different matter. The wreckage of their clash had destroyed much of Hell's material structure, and Mephisto felt the loss keenly. He couldn't afford to indulge in grief. Since these two Earthlings had come after him, he hadn't closed his eyes. It wasn't simply a question of being vulnerable while asleep. Every minute and second they fought him, he lost more control over Hell. Mephisto's situation had begun to unravel since Satanish's supposed betrayal. He'd planned, with the other Hell Lords, to plunder Satanish's Hell, the traitor's realm. Leon had earlier misled the demon gods into believing Satanish's betrayal was responsible for their capture. Even Satanish had been fooled. But now the other Hell Lords had likely profited, while Mephisto was ambushed at home by a Doctor Strange and an Ultron, locked into a desperate fight just as he was about to leave Hell. He'd even considered reconciliation. If one of the Earths he dragged into Hell belonged to this Doctor Strange, he could at least offer apologies and compensation. But these two would not relent. They kept him stuck. He had been killed 7 times already. His demon legions had been slaughtered nearly to extinction by the Kamartaj wizards. When one group of wizards fell back, another replaced them, and Mephisto could not stem the tide. His authority over Hell teetered. He wanted peace. He had proposed thousands of concessions. Still, the two Earthlings fought on. Furious and fearful, Mephisto made a decision. If he could not regain control, he would send word to the other Hell Lords. Even if Hell's stored souls and energy were divided, he would not relinquish his authority without a fight. Just as Mephisto decided to send out a distress call, someone flew into the battle zone from outside. Dressed in black battle regalia and smiling, the newcomer called, "Long time no see, Mephisto." Mephisto's pupils tightened. "It's you, the Sorcerer Supreme." The newcomer was the very Sorcerer Supreme who had recently subdued the demon gods. In that instant, Mephisto understood. These invaders had all been sent by this Sorcerer Supreme. Remembering that man's prior battle with Infinite Ultron, a chill ran down Mephisto's spine. Chapter 537, I Want Them All. Mephisto was a Hell Lord, cunning, powerful, and always presenting himself to the world with an air of elegance and dignity. He cultivated the image of a gentleman, someone who would never sully his face. Even when betrayed repeatedly, by the Ghost Rider, for example, he always managed to save face afterward. But standing before Leon, Mephisto couldn't help but think back to Leon's recent clash with Infinite Ultron, a battle that had rocked hundreds of millions of universes and could have threatened the entire multiverse if it had continued. Mephisto instinctively kept a respectful distance from people capable of that kind of destruction. In that instant, he felt the urge to turn and flee. But the invader had him cornered. If he ran, what would become of Hell? Mephisto fixed Leon with a practiced, blustering stare. "Sorcerer Supreme," he said, "what makes you dare violate Kamartaj's duty to protect Earth and invade Hell? That's a betrayal of the Vishanti." Years of scheming made the transition into threats easy for him. If you don't want the Vishanti to know what you've done, if you don't want to lose the backing of the white magic faction, you'd be wise to take your people and leave now. Those smooth manipulations were second nature. Mephisto only registered what he'd said after the words left his mouth. Leon, who had originally intended to greet Black Strange and Jarvis first, shifted his gaze toward Mephisto. "You mean you're going to tattle to the Vishanti?" Leon frowned. The suggestion sounded insane. Mephisto felt himself reel. The Vishanti had always been hostile to demons, and if the Sorcerer Supreme led Kamartaj in another assault, those 3 inflexible beings would delight in protesting. What good would it do him to complain? He hesitated, then backtracked into cajoling. "Of course, I was only joking. But Sorcerer Supreme, remember, our contract." He leaned in, his tone slipping into confidant. "You can borrow my power. We're natural allies." Mephisto watched Leon's face closely. Reading expressions was as vital to devils as temptation itself. Seeing no outright rejection, he pressed on. "Whatever your reasons for attacking Hell, you have your reasons, but why limit yourself to this place? As an ally, I could fight at your side. We could conquer other Hells. The best targets are obvious. the domains of Satanish and Dormammu. He shaped himself into the role of strategist. His words carried an almost imperceptible lure. Most mortals would find it hard to resist. Satanish has burned bridges and drawn everyone's ire. We could plunder his realm while the waters are troubled. Dormammu is weakened, embroiled in a dispute with his sister for dimensional authority. We could exploit that. Aren't those far more valuable than my little hell, esteemed Sorcerer Supreme? Mephisto was being true to form, pliant, opportunistic, and willing to sell out allies when it suited him. If this had been a different world, Leon might have privately concluded that someone like Mephisto could not be left unchecked. In the Marvel cosmos, everyone knew the demon's pettiness, amiable in front of you, plotting behind your back, preferring revenge delayed and thorough rather than immediate. Leon allowed himself a soft clap. Very well said, Mephisto. You know the realm of Split like the back of your hand. No, if it weren't for you, there'd be no opportunity at all, Mephisto replied, his crimson features curling into a hypocritical smile. He thought he'd persuaded him. Some of his anxiety melted, and privately, he vowed to reclaim his dignity later. Leon halted the applause with a wave. You misunderstand. I'm not interested in plundering Satanish and Dormammu. What I want are dimensions. Mephisto blinked, incredulous. Dimensions? You don't understand dimension lords. Once a dimension is claimed, it's nearly impossible to prize away. Snatching Dormammu's and Satanish's domains would be harder than slaying Infinite Ultron. Is that so? Leon nodded. You're right. But I'm not trying to grab those two unfortunate fools' dimensions, Leon said. Mephisto's confusion deepened. Then what do you intend? You Satanish, Marduk, all of them. Leon named the Dimension Lords with the calm certainty of someone listing treasures. He closed the 5 fingers of his right hand slowly. I want them all. For a long beat, Mephisto stared, stunned in a way he'd rarely been. He hadn't expected that answer. Sorcerer Supreme, he breathed, his gaze drilling into Leon from beneath incredulous brows. Malice and disbelief warred in his eyes. Then, without another word, Mephisto turned and ran. As a Hell Lord, he still exerted absolute command over his realm. Though his power here had been diminished, every space and current of energy obeyed him. In that instant, he resolved to escape. He siphoned the infernal energies at his command, tore open a spatial passage, and began to rush for the exit. A terrifying mental force like a boundless world descended at that moment. It struck like the most brutal of bandits. It kicked open Mephisto's mental gateway, rushed inside, and dragged Mephisto, soul and gate, out. Mephisto's vision registered a colossal palm closing around him, gripping his essence. He tried to resist, calling on hell itself, but his hold had weakened too much. Before that vast psychic pressure, his struggle ceased in an instant. The fierce mask melted away. Mephisto slowly turned and knelt before Leon, his voice keening out an impossible title. My master, allow me to offer everything in hell to you. Gone were Mephisto's cunning and posturing. In their place was naked, utter devotion. The intensity of his gaze stunned Black Strange and Jarvis standing nearby. Just as Leon had once enslaved the scroll, now he used the secret enslavement art of the starry sky to do the same to Mephisto. In the past, this would have been almost unthinkable. Dimensional demon gods are usually average in raw power, but their souls are fused to their dimensions. To invade and dominate them is to contend with an entire reality. But Leon could now overwhelm Mephisto's mental force directly. Even if Superman's greatest strength lay in his body, Golden Superman included, soaking in sunlight also elevated Leon's mind. With Mephisto's control over hell diminished, Leon bound him without breaking a sweat. I don't need you to offer me hell, Mephisto, Leon said. What you will do is what you proposed. Unite with the other demon gods to seize Satanish's dimension. Take Strange with you. Have the Camartage sorcerers disguise themselves as your underlings, blend among the demon gods. When it's time to plunder their dimensions, plunder ruthlessly. When it's time to backstab, do it without hesitation. Leon had no desire to expend endless effort in the realm of Split. But being neighbors with those violent, unscrupulous demon gods required constant vigilance. The optimal solution was to drive them out and take their dimensions. Letting Black Strange handle territory in the realm of Split had already shown good results. With Mephisto added, operations would be far more efficient. Enslaved, Mephisto had no will of his own. Every decision would now be driven by what benefited Leon. Leon's refusal to accept hell was read as mercy. Mephisto's eyes shone with gratitude. "Thank you, my merciful master," he intoned. "I will seize all the demon gods' dimensions for you." Leon nodded. "Go, rebuild your legions in hell, but from now on only harvest the souls of the wicked." Mephisto had destroyed countless worlds and slaughtered innumerable humans. Leon felt no moral qualms about binding him. Mephisto remained prostrate, not intending to rise while Leon was present. Leon ignored him and turned to Black Strange. "We can return to Earth," he said. "Let the sorcerers go home, Stephen." Black Strange's expression was glazed. He'd been shaken by the chain of events. "Huh. Yes, yes, Your Eminence," he murmured, then stole a few more glances at the groveling Mephisto before following Leon. Jarvis, however, showed no surprise. Years ago, when Leon had enslaved the Skrull, he hadn't hidden the method from Tony and Jarvis. "Long time no see, Master," Jarvis said with a smile as the infinity armor dissolved from his frame. He reverted to the familiar electronic butler of the Stark household, gentle and composed like a silver-haired gentleman. "It's been a while. You've grown used to the power of those gems?" Leon landed beside him. "Yes. Sometimes the TVA even calls on me for help. That doesn't make Mr. Stark happy." "Heh," Jarvis said. "He's jealous, isn't he? All his armors, and yet mechanical ascension still outpaces him." Leon chuckled. "Perhaps. But Mr. Stark was especially upset you missed Miss Morgan's first birthday, Master." "You missed it?" Leon blinked. Jarvis's tone softened. "Mr. Stark didn't know whether you were safe. That's what troubled him most. Now that you've returned, he's relieved. He's naturally glad." "I'll spend more time with Tony and Pepper," Leon murmured. Jarvis brightened. "Of course. And before that, Master, there are a few other ladies who have been waiting for you." "Ladies?" Leon was puzzled when several voices sped toward him. Before he could react, Diana and Kara, bathed in golden light, crashed into him like twin comets. Leon could swear that if their heads had struck a mountain, the peak would have been cleaved in two. "Oof, gently, you're breaking my bones," Leon protested, but his hands instinctively settled on their shoulders as if to steady them. A slim coil of the Golden Truth lasso slithered over his hands and snaked around his wrists. Pulled by the lasso's force, he found his hands clasped behind his back. "Diana, what are you doing?" he tried to ask. She smiled a narrow, appraising smile. "I thought someone planned to make me wait another 90 years. Before he could answer, Wanda appeared in pursuit, tearing open a mystic portal. Diana and Kara pushed him toward the opening. Beyond the doorway was solid ground and a crisp chill that announced the moon. One after another, they stepped through. Wanda's chaos magic flared. Scarlet energy unfurled over tens of kilometers, transforming the barren lunar terrain into a sea of pink cherry blossoms. The scent and sight were almost otherworldly. Crimson strands of magic wound around Leon's body. Kara's voice was cold and amused. "We're taking you." Leon tilted his head back, bracing himself. He knew he would have to use every ounce of skill and restraint to deal with these three rule breakers. Chapter 5 and 39, An Unusual Invitation. The cherry blossom grove on the moon lasted for 3 days. For that time, petals fell like waves, turning the lunar surface into a pink ocean. After 3 days, the sea of flowers vanished as if it had never been there, a fleeting dream in the indifferent cold of space. Night returned to the part of Earth where the U.S. lay. On the moon, with a single thought from Leon, the grove dispersed, the petals scattering like dust. The scene around the four changed instantly, folding back into their New York residence. Leon sent the others to their rooms and prepared to slip into a parallel world. Eternity hadn't answered him. He decided to investigate the cause of the world's collisions himself. With the number of M-bodies he had scattered across the multiverse, Leon could witness several world collisions each day. Those M-bodies, however, had limited power. It made sense to go in person with his stronger main body. He might discover more. He stepped and melted into space like a fish diving into the sea. In an instant, he crossed the void and arrived at his destination. Casually traversing time and space, immune to paradoxes, was the baseline for the Golden Superman. "This is a world where Dr. Strange caused a collision," Leon said as soon as he materialized. The entire universe's timeline unfolded before his eyes. Every life in its long river of time lay bare. This universe was a normal, sacred timeline branch. The collision's cause was the familiar interference of Doctor Strange. Leon shook his head, pushed the two about to collide worlds gently apart with a thought, and untangled their entanglement before moving on. The next universe he entered already had an M-body on watch. Leon scanned it and raised an eyebrow. This one's still in an Iron Man 2 era, and the universe is collapsing. The anchor person is dead. Looking toward Earth, he saw why. In that reality, an aged Ant-Man had massacred the heroes who would have become the Avengers. This is easy to fix. With a thought, one of Leon's embodies sent a sliver of light into the hands of Peter Parker, still an elementary school boy in that world. Peter, chosen as the Ultraman host, became the new anchor. The universe's collapse slowed and then stopped. Beyond that universe, another approached, the lively world of Party Thor. There, Daisy and Howard the Duck had produced an egg fabled to hatch a child of extraordinary talent, and every major power in that universe scrambled to control it. Leon watched that spectacle briefly and then moved on. What puzzled him was not those familiar cases of entanglement, those had clear causes, but two universes that seemingly had no connection at all, yet were about to collide. He activated his supervision, the first time since becoming half of Golden Superman. Where a normal Superman's supervision could be blocked by lead, Leon's sight now resembled a god's. The world became transparent, layers of dimension flattened into translucent planes. The rules of reality showed themselves as countless manipulable lines. He could move those lines with thought and alter how the universe operated. From that vantage, he still found no connection between the two colliding universes. No temporal entanglement, no spatial overlap, no mutual interference on the reality level. Two worlds with no apparent intersection were converging. Could this be a natural law? He pondered. Both were branches of the sacred timeline, and nothing else linked them. He couldn't find a timeline glitch to blame. He pushed them apart and pressed on. In a single day, Leon wandered through thousands of universes, both those his M-bodies monitored and many he found by chance. Doctor Strange turned out to be responsible for a large share of disturbances. In eras when Reed Richards hadn't yet asserted dominance and Tony Stark hadn't plunged into the multiverse, Strange's meddling wreaked havoc across realities. But not all collisions were his doing. Tracing timelines back through several affected worlds, Leon found a common origin. An obliviate spell cast by Doctor Strange in the main universe years ago to help a young Peter Parker get into college. The spell had been miscast. Its ripple tore at barriers between universes, letting villains from other Spider-Man worlds spill into the main universe and drawing the attention of powerful, multiversal entities. The result was a contracted, unstable multiverse in which worlds drifted closer, colliding with increasing frequency. At first, Leon concluded that Strange's botched obliviate explained the continuous collisions. Yet something niggled at him. He sensed an extra unseen factor. If the obliviate were the only problem, cleaning up the spell and shoring up the barriers should have sufficed. But he had a bad feeling. At his level, intuition was sometimes closer to insight than dry logic. With that unease in his chest, Leon folded into space and returned to his own universe. He guessed Diana and the others would be waking. When he stepped inside, though, he found them dressed in formal gowns, smoothing each other's hems as if for a somber ceremony. "Why the dresses? Are you planning to challenge me again?" Leon joked. Diana shook her head. She wore a dark blue knit dress with a shawl draped at her waist. The cinched waistline outlined a graceful curve. She set a small black-laced hat on her head and handed Leon an envelope edged in gold. He opened it and stared. "An invitation from Asgard? Odin is inviting us to his funeral?" Chapter 540, Odin's Envy. The coastal port of Asgard was a world of torches tonight. The stars were dim and lightless. Only a thin, pale ribbon of light clung to the far edge of the sea. Asgardians stood silently along the shore, each holding a burning torch. The flickering flames painted their faces and shone in their eyes. Sorcerers from Kamartaj stood among them, torches in hand, watching Odin with the same grief as the rest. Odin had already been laid upon the small boat prepared for a sea burial. It was like a Viking longship, its bow and stern curling high like the head and tail of a sea serpent, just long enough for him to lie flat. Around him lay bunches of flowers, armors, and robes, old companions that had stood by him for ages. Normally, only those who died in battle were placed upon such a boat, set aflame, and sent out to sea. When the body burned, the warrior's soul would rise to Valhalla to share eternal glory with the ancestors. Odin had not died in battle, he had not died at all yet, and he was arranging to lie on that boat himself. But Valhalla was his to command. He could enter it however he pleased. A wave of sorrow hung over the Asgardians. No one spoke. The anguish and bewilderment were visible in every torchlit face. Queen Frigga drew Thor and Loki close, one on either side, trembling with grief. Even Loki, who had become a household name on Earth, a star whose every film mercilessly lampooned Thor and Odin, showed genuine sadness. No matter how much fame he found elsewhere, his heart belonged to Asgard, to those soaring halls, to Thor, Odin, and Frigga. If Loki felt it keenly, Thor felt it all the more. The golden-haired warrior wiped tears with a rough hand. In the original timeline, this Thor had not known the loss of a loved one like this. Now he did, and the sorrow was thick enough to touch the visiting sorcerers from Camartage. Even the usually loud Pietro was silent. Leon, however, remained composed. He knew that after Odin's death, he would find it easier to live in Valhalla, though he could not fathom why Odin would choose to die now, and why voluntarily. In the sacred timeline, Odin was supposed to die in Norway on Earth in 2017. How could this be Odin, after 6 years of slumber, preferring to die prematurely in 2015? Leon watched the old figure on the boat and felt a foolish little impression. The scene was oddly theatrical, like a flamboyant ruler staging his own curtain call. The deceased inviting everyone to his funeral, asking them to come, waiting for his death, offering words of peace. It smacked of showmanship. When Leon first received the invitation, a thought flickered through his mind. Maybe Odin was just reminding him to return the divine artifacts. If he didn't, perhaps the old king would come to Earth like an avenging saint brandishing a relic. But this was different. Odin truly seemed prepared to leave. Dressed in sumptuous robes and hunched on the boat, he stared out at the horizon as if taking his final look at the world. Grief and reluctance rose from him like the tide. Anyone could see he was ready. After a long silence, Odin turned his face and with a voice gentler than any kingly command he had used for centuries, said, "Mr. Leon, could you come closer?" "Of course." Leon walked slowly to the side of the boat, torch held steady. He looked at Odin's weathered face, and instead of making a cruel remark about returning Frigga, let his provocation take another form. "Old man," he said lightly, "if you're about to die because you can't get the divine artifacts back and feel ashamed before the other god kings, you don't have to." "I used the eternal flame and the casket of ancient winters," Leon continued. "If you want them back, I'll return them, if you tell me. We agreed on 5 years, but I kept them 6. I just forgot. 2 artifacts aren't worth dying for, Odin." Odin sat in the dim torchlight, steeped in the gloom of his decision. Leon's words made his face twitch. He looked as if he might complain, then opened and closed his mouth several times before answering. "The artifacts are irrelevant, Mr. Leon." "Then why are you preparing to go to Valhalla early?" Leon asked. Odin sighed. "During my slumber, I heard from other dimensions that you recently saved the multiverse and rose to the heights of the Vishanti." "That's true," Leon admitted with a nod. "Then you must know this world may soon face an unimaginable crisis." Odin's voice dropped. "I tempered Thor and gave Loki choices, all in preparation for Ragnarok. But what is Ragnarok in the face of a greater threat? Thor needs more growth, more power. Asgard no longer needs me. It needs a god king who can surpass me." Slowly, Leon understood. Odin meant to pass his power to Thor so the sun could stand strong against what was to come. "I see," Leon said. "A wise choice." Odin's tired face relaxed into something like a small smile. "Mr. Leon, you do not need to return those 2 artifacts. Consider them Asgard's most sincere gift." He swept a hand toward the shore. "And take from our treasury whatever you can use." Leon chuckled. "So you think Asgard is doomed and you're just dividing the family property early?" Odin's eyes flickered. "Long years have taught me that sharing our fruits with our allies is the right course." "And a bit late," Leon said lightly. "You should have tied everything in Asgard to me when we first met." Odin no longer hid what he felt. The Ancient One is a more fitting guardian than I, he said quietly. Her vision is truer than mine. Leon couldn't help teasing. I doubt the Ancient One would agree. She's still at the academy, telling students the new Wi-Fi password every day.